Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment by yours truly. This is from Chapter 1, The Unholy Alliance of Racism, Genocide, and Guns. In Isaiah 14:21, the Lord tells Isaiah, "Prepare for his sons a place of slaughter because of the iniquity of their fathers." It's a variation on the old story of karma and seems in a very real way to be playing out today in the United States. America is facing an epidemic. Public health officials use that word of gun-related suicides, accidents, and even homicides and police killings. That epidemic has grown worse in the past decade, largely because the number of guns in America has increased, in large part because of the racial fears of white men who have bought guns in record numbers for 8 years during the time in office of America's first black president. A landmark 1999 study from researchers Franklin Zimring and Gordon Hawkins showed that the main correlation, far surpassing mental illness, socioeconomic status, or race, that could be defined as causal in predicting the rates of gun deaths is a simple number: the number of guns distributed among society. In the 30 years since that study, Zimring and Hawkins' results have been replicated and reanalyzed dozens of times. As the American Academy of Pediatrics said in a release published in AAAS's Science magazine, quote, "New research shows dramatic differences in the number of children hospitalized and killed each year in the U.S. from firearm-related injuries based on their state's gun legislation, even after adjusting for poverty, unemployment, and education rates. It found twice as many pediatric firearm deaths in states with the most lenient gun regulations compared to states where gun laws are strictest," end quote. They added that this is a critical issue for children, quoting Stephanie Cho, MD, the lead author of the abstract, quote, "Firearm-related injuries are the second leading cause of death among children in the United States. But we found a clear discrepancy in where those deaths happen that corresponds with the strengths of states' firearm legislation. In states with lenient laws, children die at alarmingly greater rates," end quote. And unsurprisingly, America not only has unusually lenient gun laws, but also has more guns in civilian hands than any other country in the world. America has a bit more than 4% of the world's population, but holds almost 50% of all the guns in civilian hands worldwide, more than 390 million guns. And the more guns a society has, the more gun deaths it will experience. The NRA and their army of lobbyists have been quite successful in making this happen. During Obama's presidency, there was a steady and hysterical drumbeat of articles, emails, and political proclamations by so-called pro-gun politicians and think tanks, suggesting that Obama was preparing to take away everyone's guns at any minute. There was even a subtext embraced by the hard right that he wasn't going to stop there. After disarming white Americans, these folks said, Obama was going to intern them in otherwise unused FEMA camps. Flipped-out gun owners were repeatedly arrested during the Obama years trying to break into retired or temporarily vacant military facilities and toxic waste sites, looking for evidence to prove that Obama was, in fact, preparing the modern-day version of the World War II-era Japanese internment camps. White supremacy was the founding notion of this nation. White Europeans thought themselves so superior to the human beings they met here in 1492 that Columbus himself became the first North American slaver, shipping Taino Indians back to Spain as slaves to the royal family. "A slave is as good as gold," Columbus wrote for the king and queen. Europeans in the Americas then stepped up that game into a hemisphere-wide campaign of racial genocide, pulling off the largest multi-generational mass murder in the history of the world. In the midst of that effort, they also created the legal mechanisms necessary to define and legally regulate slavery, and even built those systems into America's founding document, the Constitution. America was birthed in slavery and genocide, and both needed guns. It was the superior weaponry of guns that gave the European settlers a massive advantage over the bow and arrow-equipped Native Americans, and it was the raw power of widespread white ownership of guns in the South that propped up the institution of slavery for hundreds of years. Without guns, neither would have been possible, or at least neither would have been as easy as they were to pull off. And now, after centuries of guns being used to kill off and keep down people of color in America, those same guns are creating a terrifying epidemic of gun-facilitated violence, from public schools to private homes and public concerts. It's enough to make one think that Isaiah was onto something. Chapter 2, The Sanitized History of America. The United States' expansion and conquest in the late 18th century through the 19th century and into the 20th century is a history written by white men, inked in the blood of Native Americans, and built on the broken and bloody backs of enslaved people brought here from Africa. From 1791, when the Bill of Rights went into effect, until the end of the Civil War, the Second Amendment protected the rights only of white men to own guns. This is simply because until the ratification of the 14th Amendment, states determined who was recognized as a person protected under the Constitution. Initially, in most states, that meant that white men who owned land and paid taxes were the only people considered full citizens under the Constitution. In the South, white men with guns formed slave patrols to control slaves and formed posses to hunt escaped slaves. The book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, it's Call for Change Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program and all across Sirius XM Progress, channel 127. The theme for the day today would have been the 27th birthday of Breonna Taylor, the emergency medical technician who was working on becoming a nurse, who was murdered in her bed asleep by police in Louisville. The protests against the murder by police of George Floyd continue all across the United States. New developments in the Ahmaud Arbery case. I mean, it's just going on and on and on. Congressman Ro Khanna is going to drop by in about a half hour to talk with us about these issues. He won't be taking your calls. I want to have a conversation with him about what's going on in America today. Dr. Robin Cooper of the Teamsters is going to be with us in our second hour. This is about stamping out racism in our schools. And this is the Commonwealth Association of School Administrators, Teamsters Local 502. And Kimon Freeman, the program director of We Act Radio and an activist with Black Lives Matter DC, will be with us as well in our second hour. So we've got a lot coming up today. In addition to taking your calls, I mean, typically Fridays are Anything Goes Friday, and we're not going to set that aside altogether. We will be taking your calls, although I would like to the extent possible, keep the focus here on police brutality and particularly as it's directed against people of color. I'd like to open, in fact, one of the people who works with me on my books with BK Publishing, Linda Jupiter, sent this to me. And we've all heard this and I've read it before, but it was just perfect for today, so I printed it out. This is from Frederick Douglass, essentially our quote for the day. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation, Bill Barr. I'm not going to editorialize. I'll just read it straight up because after all, it's Frederick Douglass. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are people who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the roar of its many waters. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both. But it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. To recap what we're seeing all across the United States is a pretty good summary of this over at today's New York Times. Just share some pieces from Sean Hubler and Julie Bozeman's piece on this. In California, an officer sitting in a police car in Vallejo shot and killed a 22-year-old man who was on his knees with his hands up. He had a hammer in his sweatshirt pocket. They thought it was a gun, or at least that was their excuse. I think you have to give them the benefit of the doubt on that, but still shooting. In Texas, a 20-year-old protester shot in the head by police officers in Austin with what's described as non-lethal beanbag ammunition has been left with brain damage and a fractured skull. Cell phone videos show New York City police officers beating unarmed protesters and sideswiping demonstrators with open squad car doors. I am calling on Governor Cuomo to walk back his comments yesterday, basically in defense of these police. And for that matter, Mayor Bill de Blasio as well. And both of you guys, Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio, if you can't, if you're afraid to take on the so-called police union. In most cases, these aren't actually even unions. In many, many cases, in fact, probably in most cases, they're not unions. They're protection rackets run to protect bad cops. If you're afraid to take on the unions, the police union, resign. I don't care how liberal or democratic you are, resign if you're afraid to take on your own cops. You're supposed to be in charge of them. In Atlanta, a half dozen officers have been criminally charged after a violent attack on 2 college students sitting in a car during protests. On live television, police officers in Louisville, Kentucky, fired pepper spray balls at journalists. We've got basically what we have are police riots all over the United States. To the best of my knowledge, there was virtually no looting or anything like that by protesters yesterday, but we had considerable rioting all across the United States by police. We are looking at police riots. In Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Miami Herald reporters filmed officers who were shooting a nonviolent protester in the head, fracturing her eye socket and leaving her screaming and bloody. In Kansas City, Missouri, the police walked onto the sidewalk to use pepper spray on protesters. In Buffalo, police officers in riot gear shoved a 75-year-old man to the ground and walked away as he lay unconscious on the sidewalk with blood coming out of his ear. 2 of the 15 officers, presumably the first one who shoved him and the second one who stopped a third officer from bending over and maybe helping the guy, those 2 have been suspended, but 15 different officers walked by this guy as he lay bleeding unconscious on the pavement until finally a National Guard person said, hey, wait a minute. In North Carolina, a North Carolina lawyer compiled a gigantic thread. I retweeted this yesterday. A gigantic thread of clips of police rioting against civilians. 281 separate clips from different cities all across the United States. We are in full-blown police riot mode. You've got Donald Trump, the president, who said to a police officers association, when you take somebody into custody, rough them up. You've got Bill Barr, the Attorney General, who spoke to a police association and said that if communities, which I would suggest was code for black communities, aren't going to respect police officers, maybe they shouldn't have policing. Not a verbatim quote, but the essence of what he said. Trump has tweeted that the assertions by the media that tear gas and rubber bullets were used to clear the area in front of St. John's Church, right next door to the White House, were lies and fake news. So the headline of the day award goes to the Washington Post. This is their headline. God bless them. White House says police didn't use tear gas and rubber bullets in incident that cleared protesters with chemical irritants and projectile munitions. Meanwhile, Bill Barr came out of his cave yesterday and said essentially, well, he said literally, there was no correlation between our tactical plan of moving the perimeter out by 1 block and the president's going over to the church. So California Senator Kamala Harris says, I invite Bill Barr to say this in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which she serves on, by the way, under oath. Right, well, that ain't going to happen. And meanwhile, an advocacy group bought thousands, tens of thousands of face masks to send to protesters in New York City, Minneapolis, St. Louis, and Washington, D.C. from a company that makes custom masks with slogans on them. This slogan says, stop killing black people. The company made them. The company packaged them and delivered them to the post office. The company attached to those packages a postal receipt so you could track the package. They never arrived. The post office officially says they were intercepted by law enforcement. Right. The Justice Department, led by Attorney General Bill Barr, has taken an aggressive posture against demonstrations and on Thursday expressed concerns about extremist agitators.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's a call for change today. And frankly, my call would be to disband these so-called police unions all across the country and some of the police departments. And welcome back. Daryl in Seattle. Hey, Daryl, what's up?
Oh, that was quick. Hi, Tom. Listen to this Jim Adams the other day about the bears in Alaska, where I thought I'd give you a little background for your listeners. I hope I don't insult any of the folks up there, because I feel very, very emotional about this. And I lived in Alaska in the 70s, and it was a wonderful place until the pipeline came up, and then every form of opportunists came up, and all the parks were filled up with station wagons, 3 kids' tents, and they give out $500 a head back. This is 40 years ago, to every Alaskan. I believe you have to live there a year, and I believe it's the entire family. A little bit like Norway. It's oil revenue stuff. So in a way, it's a bit of a welfare state, and it attracts.
What's your point, Daryl?
My point is that these people have to. A lot of them have temporary work in the summertime, and in the winter they bag moose and elk, and these are the backbones of the of this legislation that's going in to kill bears and cubs.
Right, as our guest the other day described.
So
what's
really
your point?
Depressed me. I wrote.
Okay. All right, I got it. You know, Daryl, respectfully, I'd like to stay on, broadly speaking, I'd like to stay on this topic. Van in Los Angeles. Hey, Van, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
How you doing, Tom? Glad to be listening to your show. I got a question. I'm just glad to see so many people from all ethnic races coming together, and finally we're coming to defeat this man and to bring peace back into our society. But the one thing I wanted to ask is, this man is carrying on like Himmler. And he's being a secret.
Which man are you talking about?
Donald Trump and all the rest of them, all the people who are in the Republican Party. But one of the things I wanted to say to you is that it wasn't illegal for those guys to come and move a dead body? Once the body is dead, isn't it lawful that the forensics take over at that point and nobody can move the body? There were 2 men who were dressed in brown coats, like they were dressed in brown shirts. And
you're talking about George Floyd's body here?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
George Floyd's body. They came and moved his body, and that was illegal. I think that at that point, when the man dies, when George Floyd died, it is supposed to be covered until forensics come out and do an investigation. At that point, it no longer belongs to the police department. Am I right or wrong?
I don't know, Van. I'm guessing that those policies and or laws probably vary from state to state, or at least vary somewhat. But my understanding was that an ambulance was called, EMTs showed up, and it was the EMTs who discovered that he was dead. And they loaded him in the ambulance, and that he was not pronounced dead until he got to the hospital, where a doctor could officially pronounce him dead.
Well,
but,
I don't
obviously
think
he was dead at the scene.
I don't think that was an ambulance at all, Tom. And not only that, we never saw an EMT check his body temperature, check his pulse, or anything like that. I think there was something fishy about that whole thing, and the 2 guys who moved the body should be under investigation too, and they should be arrested as well. You know?
Okay, Van, I haven't seen the video of his body being collected and moved, so I can't respond to you. I'm sorry. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. We're talking about policing in the United States. We're talking about race relations in the United States. We're talking about the racism, the institutional racism from our schools to our police departments, right across the board.
Today is a day of action. Today is a call for change.
We have a new video over at thomhartmann.com for the people who support our program, and it's an interesting one. The phrase, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, has a really interesting history, and the exploitation of that phrase and that history by right-wingers in 20th century America, or late 20th century America, now 21st century America, also has a fascinating and rather grim history. Just the general absurdity of the idea that somebody can lift themselves off the ground by reaching down and pulling on a strap on their boots. I mean, just think about it for a second. But it's used, this is used as justification by right-wingers, particularly over the last 40 years since the Reagan Revolution, to say, oh, poor people, their poverty is their own fault. Check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, that was... I've got a pile of news here that we'll be getting to as we continue throughout the day. But let's continue this conversation. Generally speaking on whatever's on your mind, but also specifically to the extent possible, and I will prioritize calls that have to do with the issues of policing and race in the United States. We are facing a real serious crisis here. I will be in the second or third hour also getting into the economy and the numbers and Trump's saying George Floyd would be so happy that unemployment is down right now when in fact it's a disaster. But we'll get to that later. Cassandra in Camas, Washington. Hey, Cassandra, what's on your mind today?
Hi.
Hi.
I just have a comment to make concerning the anti-lynching bill that is being held up at the present moment by we all know who in the Senate.
Senator Rand Paul, for anybody who wasn't listening yesterday, yes.
Yeah. It isn't a given, and I think we need to wake up to this fact as white people in America, all of us that are, that the reason why it is being held up is that it is an automatic assumption. Sorry, that's my radio at work. It is an automatic assumption that lynching is only about black people, Hispanic people, people of color. No one expects white people to be lynched. It's just a given. So that means that you are holding up a bill that has to do with protecting people of color, because no one expects lynching to even remotely revolve around white people. And these police forces have been given carte blanche to go out and lynch people at this point. And they're not going out and lynching white people. They are lynching people of color. And the sad thing to me about this is that I have a nephew who is on the police force, has been for a few years, and he did the typical route that most of our police, 99% of our police take, which is straight out of the military into the police force, which means you're taking people who have been told to fight for their country in a foreign land or whatever, and in the moment, of course, last 20-odd years, it's in a foreign countries, and not to protect us here on our own soil, but somewhere else. And here's your opponent, and now we bring you home, and we don't decompress you. We just send you right back out, and you need an opponent. Who's the opponent? It is the American people now. And more precisely, it is the people who live within America of color that they are now being told, here, vent all your anger, vent all your frustration, your PTSD, vent it on the people that are your fellow Americans. And the sad part to me is that these people are being manipulated. These police, these military are being manipulated and used just as much. And they cannot see this. They are being used as much as anyone who is being afflicted in this country. And someday they're going to turn around and realize that someone they've maced, someone they have stunned with the bullets, the rubber bullets, they're going to realize that was a family member, that was a friend. So the people you profess to love, you are now harming just because they don't know them. These men in Minneapolis who, they didn't even live in the area. They lived outside. So yes, you have no connection to these people there. But what happens when it is your own people that you know? Well, you are hurting someone's son, someone's mother, someone's brother, someone's grandfather, pushed down on a, and he's left there to bleed on the cement. This is disgusting. And we have to wake the police and the military up to the fact that you are harming your own people, whatever the color of their skin. You're harming everyone, including yourself.
Right, absolutely, and you're losing your soul in the process. Cassandra, thank you. Very eloquent, very eloquent. And let me just add to that. Number one, in basically every war we've had since the end of World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the various military incursions in Central and South America, the Vietnam War, the Iraq War, the Afghan War, Libya, you name it. We are training our military, particularly the white military who transition into the white police forces around the country. We are training them to kill people who look different from them. And there's a long tradition of this outside the military, inside policing. In the United States, up until the middle of the 1800s, many communities in the United States, arguably most communities in the United States, did not have formal police departments. There would be somebody who was deputized as a sheriff. It was a part-time job. It was sort of like being a member of the volunteer fire department. The whole formal policing thing largely was not happening in what we called police. It was happening in the northern states. It was simply happening as I just described. In the southern states, it was happening as something called the slave patrols. And I wrote an entire book about this, the hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was passed specifically to protect the slave patrols in Virginia, Georgia, the Carolinas, Alabama. That's why it's there. And our modern day policing in the United States uniquely grew out of the slave patrols. That's why policing is so different in Canada. We joke about Dudley Do-Right and the Mounties. They're respectful to people. Why policing is so different in Europe. They didn't have the slave patrols. We still do.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment.
This
I want to say a special word of thanks, a special thank you to those of you who have already called 877-378-8669 and made your contribution to Free Speech TV. We've had a number of people contribute. It is really heartwarming. It really means a lot. And it also is going to help us keep going. We're nowhere close to our goals. We still have a ways to go, and we'll be showing up every day until we finally hit them. But a lot of you have, and I just wanted to thank you. I don't think that I acknowledge people enough, just generally in my life and here too. It means a lot to all of us. And thank you so much for the help that you've been giving. If you haven't yet called Free Speech TV, to say, yes, I watch programs on Free Speech TV. I watch the Thom Hartmann Program. I get value from the Thom Hartmann Program. I use some of the things he says in my interactions with others. I post stuff on Facebook or Twitter, or I tell my friends or whatever. And you haven't called Free Speech TV yet? Please do. Please. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. This network does not exist if you don't support it. Yeah, you. Seriously. And we need your help. We need your help. We're behind. It costs money to run a network. I realize it's a tough time. I think I've talked about that probably way more than I need to over the last few fundraisers, so I'll just leave it at that. But please, if you can help out, call now. And you can also go to freespeech.org and contribute as well. But please do it now during the show. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number to support this extraordinary television network. The little engine that could. The work that they're doing is just spectacular. With a $20 gift, you get your choice of the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting Are You car magnet. With a $50 gift, you get your choice of the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann mug with my mug on it, my face on it. With a $100 gift, you get the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. With a $120 gift, we've got a pile of choices for you. A whole bunch of different things that you can choose from. With a $120 gift, there's the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. There is Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. There's Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. There's Tim Wise's book, Dear White America. There is Paul Kivel's book, Uprooting Racism. Your choice, any of those premiums, any of those gifts, with a $120 gift. With a $240 gift, you can hang out with me and a couple of small number of other donors and a live Zoom conversation, and we can just, have a candid conversation about the events of the day or whatever questions you may have or whatever you want to pitch to me. If you want me to know about something or think about something, this is the way to do it. And so the $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, the Hidden History of the War on Voting book, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, and the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. All of that comes in the Thom Hartmann University box for $360. And with a $1,000 gift, when all this settles down, and hopefully that day will come when we've all had a vaccine or whatever it takes, come to Portland and hang out with us. You can watch the 3rd hour of the show, and we'll walk down the street to a nice little restaurant and have lunch together. So those are the premiums, basically, the gifts that are being offered by Free Speech TV. But the real gift from you to us is calling and making a contribution, be it a one-time contribution or a commitment for, to be a member of the Sustainers Group, a regular monthly contribution. And of course, our gift to you is all the work, and there's an enormous amount of work. Every Friday afternoon, I read the list of all the people on this show who work on this program. I think it's probably about 15 people. And over at Free Speech TV, you got a TV network. It's being run by something in the neighborhood of about 20 people. There's a bunch of us working on this program and on this network to bring this all to you. And if we make it look easy, that's great. That's an indication that we put the extra work in, because it's not easy. There's actually an enormous amount of time and effort that goes into producing 3 hours of good television programming. On my end, there's a lot of work. On the people who work with me, on Sean's end and Nate's end, and Patrick and Nigel and Sue and Geraldine and Dave and Joyce and over at Free Speech TV. It's no small thing, and we need your help to keep it going. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and share what you can with Free Speech TV.
Call for action. Call for change.
It's a call for change day all across Sirius XM's Progress 127 channel. And on the line with us is Congressman Ro Khanna, a regular on our program. Typically, he's taking your phone calls, but I wanted to have a conversation with him and get into some depth here over the course of the next 30 minutes. Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov is his website. His Twitter handle is Rep Ro Khanna, as in representative. He is a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. He represents the Silicon Valley area of California. And he's also the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. and the 17th District of California, I should have mentioned. And Congressman Khanna, welcome back, and thanks so much for being with us. I'm wondering if, first of all, there are any kind of general comments before I get into some specific questions and conversation with you that you'd like to make about this day and this moment in our history.
Well, it's such a challenging moment for the nation, reminding us of how far we still have to go in terms of racial equality. I was rereading some of Dr. King's speeches, and you could literally have the exact same speech given today, where he talked about his opposition to rioting, but said that really wasn't the issue. The question was, why are people rioting, and that the only way to have some sense of unity is not by having an accommodation to injustice, but by tackling the underlying injustices. And, you know, of course, the philosopher Charles Taylor has said that when you have a history of 250 plus years of slavery and then 100 years following that of Jim Crow, ingrained in the psyche of the country has been black people as less than. And the idea that after 50 years of a civil rights movement, we would change that fundamental mentality, obviously that has not been the case. And so it's a very deep cultural issue of how we overcome something that has been ingrained for so many years in the American psyche.
I'm wondering if you are comfortable speaking about your experience as a minority in America.
Sure. I mean, first, let me say this. Growing up Indian American in Bucks County, Pennsylvania is very different than growing up black in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And so I think we have to be speaking bluntly or truthfully in this moment that being a person of color is very different than being a black person. The Indian American experience is certainly one of a challenge. I mean, my grandfather, as you know, spent 4 years in jail with Gandhi's independence movement. And in the 1920s, there was a famous case, the Singh case, where an Indian person of Indian origin was not considered eligible to be a citizen of this country. But it has not been the same systematic view of inferiority that has been at the very founding of our country and the black experience. And so were they times growing up that I was told, you know, you should go back to India, or were they times that I was outside a gas station and I had a cop car pull up because I was pacing? Yes. But by and large, I had the good fortune of having teachers who believed in me, neighbors who believed in me, a community, even though it was relatively almost all white, that allowed me to believe in my dreams. But you look at what I had. I had a good public school. I lived in a safe neighborhood. Yet the incidents of racism were isolated and not the norm. And you compare that on the flip side to many African-American experiences. For them, the incidences of discrimination, of inferiority, are too pervasive. It is part of their life. It's not the exception. And then when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's not just police violence, but it's the lack of fair education, of fair health care, of all of the opportunities that this country gave me. So it certainly, being a person of color, gives me a sense of the difficulty of becoming a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy, but it in no way compares to the struggle and suffering of the black experience.
A multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy, small d democracy, is something that is, as far as I know, in the large arc of history, pretty unique. I mean, you know, Roman citizens, occasionally people who were not Italian were given Roman citizenship, but it was very, very rare. It was a huge reward for something. You know, the Greeks, both Romans and Greeks were slaveholders. The Greeks took people, in some cases they were people who were European, but nonetheless they were not Greeks, and held them as slaves. But most of your European countries, at least initially, were largely ethnically, racially homogenous, or heterogeneous, rather. I always mix those words up. I'm sorry. Correct me. And I'm wondering, this was laid out. In fact, there's a brilliant new book out. It's called. In fact, I have it right here on my bookshelf. It's by Bradley Thompson, and it's called America's Revolutionary Mind. I just read this about a month ago, and it just blew my mind. And it was about how right up until around 1810, 1820, the founding generation was a generation of just crazed idealists, like the hippies of the 70s, 60s, who actually did think that they could end slavery within 2 generations, and actually did think that there could be a pluralistic society. It might be a segregated one, as geographically, James Monroe famously, exported people to Africa and created Liberia and all that kind of stuff. But there was this idea that possibly we could all live together. That kind of got blown up when the cotton gin was invented, and the value of an individual held in bondage exploded, and the oligarchy evolved in the South. But this is something in the United States that I don't think any other country has successfully done. Am I missing something? And what are your thoughts on that, and how we move forward, and to what extent we offer an example to the world, particularly as many of these other countries, these European, historically all-white countries, have been bringing people in from Germany in the 50s, with the Gastarbeiters, the Turks, who have now become somewhat integrated into German society, to the Syrian refugees and whatnot who are coming into other countries. Your thoughts?
That's a very profound question, and I think that, of course, is the promise of our experiment, that you could have a nation with a common culture, the common culture being what Lincoln called the political religion of the country, that our common culture is the affirmation of our democratic ideals, that everyone can pursue their dreams, their happiness, regardless of their creed, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their race. And I would argue that there are 2 separate challenges. The one is a challenge of increasing diversity. So for the first time post-65 immigration, we have people of very different faiths. I mean, I'm of Hindu faith, and it's not as majority Christian and Jewish. And we have people not just of European heritage, but from many other parts of the world, and parts of the world that were subject to colonialism, as India was. So that has made the challenge of common culture, and where you have common culture, a difficult challenge. And you can't just say, well, let's embrace a common political culture, but we don't really need a common American culture, because if you don't have some common American culture, you're made other, you're marginalized, your voice, you don't get elected, you don't get taken seriously at a town hall. And so part of the challenge in the country is this figuring out how to tolerate dissent and subcultures and letting people be proud of who they are, but having a sufficient common glue that we can have conversation and have a common framework. That's one challenge. Wholly apart from that is, I think, even a deeper challenge, and that is the issue of race, that we had this original sin of bringing people in bondage. And for so many generations, the way the African American community has been treated has been one of consciously and subconsciously thinking of them as less than. And so then the question becomes, how do you move forward, not just in having a common American culture, but in recognizing the historical injustices and having some redress for that? And I think if we can, make progress on both of these issues, we do have this possibility of emerging as one of the first multiracial, multi-ethnic democracies in the world. And that, in my view, would be America's greatest contribution to human civilization. But the events of these last couple of weeks have shown how far we still have to go.
Yeah, and it seems to be stretching to the top. We just have 30 seconds till we hit a break. Are you hopeful that the Republican Party can step back from the edge of their embrace of racism?
I don't know. I'm having a conversation with Mike Gallagher tonight from Wisconsin, a reasonable Republican, and on Instagram, and I'm going to talk about something, see where he is on these issues of police violence and where he is on the issues of race, but not under the Trump party. I mean, Trump is going to take this 2020 into the gutter. Right. Worse than Nixon.
Yeah, and Reagan used race, and George Herbert Walker Bush with the Willie Horton ads used race. I mean, this is just a remarkable thing. Congressman Ro Khanna is with us. We'll be talking for the next half hour or the next 15 minutes.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with my conversation here with Congressman Khanna. Stick around. And Congressman Khanna, I could barely hear you through the music. That you were trying to make an additional point there, just as we hit the break.
No, I appreciate it. I think you're absolutely right that Reagan used these dog whistles, and certainly Bush Sr. did, and Nixon did even more explicitly. But you always got a sense of them that this was something that they were ashamed of doing. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't do it, and they were willing to do it to gain power. But they would have their Lee Atwater do it and keep their hands clean, because they wanted to project both to themselves and to the country in the sense that they were above these prejudices. Of course, they had to hire the dirty folks, the operators, to do the dirty work, and that was the cost of democracy. The difference with Trump is that there is no sense of shame. There is no filter. There is no sense that this is something bad. And I do think that that's a qualitative difference.
Do you think that that's the result of the way he was raised? I mean, his father was arrested at a Klan riot in the 1920s. His first job working for his dad was writing the letter C on the applications for rental in the low-income housing units that his father owned, C indicating colored for, so that they could filter out black people and other people of color. Do you think that this is just like baked into him and he hasn't has not awakened?
Yeah, I think it's partly how he was raised, and in his sense that this is the order of America that he believes in. I mean, when he talks about going back to the 50s and 60s, it's not just about bringing back manufacturing; it's about going back to that social order that he was raised in. But I think the other difference is while Reagan and Bush and Nixon appealed to these types of tactics to divide people and play to their fears of the division that could be caused in society or the insurrection that could be caused in society. I think Trump is, for the really first time, playing the idea of white people as victims, as aggrieved, as having lost something. And I think that's actually his worldview, that he feels that they have lost their place, and they're fighting for that place, and that's why, as terrible as it is, that's why for 45% of his base, there is they see him as authentic in that view.
So Nixon, in his shout out to the silent majority, he basically meant white people. Nixon was willing to use that sense of victimhood and exploit it, but he probably personally didn't experience it. But you think that Trump actually does believe this? Is that? Am I correctly rephrasing what you're saying?
I think he believes that there's a sense of loss of the average American and many white Americans' place in the country and place in the world. And he's fighting to redeem that place. And
it's a loss of privilege, right?
Yeah, and in doing that, he's got total blinders to the loss of communities which really have faced oppression, racism, subjugation. Let me give you a very concrete example. Why is it that suddenly when we talk about broadband, which I'm a big believer in, we've got to give everyone access to the internet, suddenly it's a big issue with rural communities, rural white communities, but black communities have been denied the internet access for so many years, and no one was talking about that. So there's this sense of race in making us
hold that
blind,
right there. Hold that. We'll revisit it. Hang on just a second.
While our leader hides in a bunker, we're here with a call for change.
Hey, we have a new video up for the supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. I really enjoy doing these separate from what we're doing on the air because sometimes I can say things that would be impolitic or inappropriate to say on the air. Like the name of the website that I'm talking about in this video, and I lay it out and share it with you on the video. It's ratbleepingthecourts.com. And the bleeping, of course, is a word that you just can't say on the air that starts with F. And this website is just outing these judges that Donald Trump and the Federalist Society have been sending through Mitch McConnell's Senate like a friggin' assembly line, and how unqualified they are, how hateful they are, how aggressively they've worked to screw students, to deny. Well, one of them actually said that women who are on birth control pills, that should be reason to fire people. Right? I mean, it's just insane. You can check it out over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We're talking with Congressman Ro Khanna. Congressman, you were just talking about, we were just talking just a moment ago, and I'd like you to kind of recap that for us, but I wanted to fill something in first about race and broadband, it was a fascinating insight, and I want to hear the details of it. I'm writing this series of books called the Hidden History series. We have a contract to write 10 of them over a 5-year period. And the one I'm writing right now, which will be out in the fall of next year, is the hidden history of healthcare in the United States. And I'm doing this deep, deep dive into it. And what I'm finding is that every single time single-payer healthcare has been defeated in the United States, and it's been proposed numerous times going all the way back to the late 1800s, by very credible and serious people, including several presidents of the United States. Every time it's been defeated by Southerners. It was Southern Democrats pre-1960. Because they didn't want black people to have access to hospitals. They wanted to maintain segregation. Literally, the only reason why we don't have a national health care system, probably 80% of the reason why we don't, is because of white racism in the United States. You were speaking about something similar to this with regard to broadband. You want to tell us about that?
Well, I echo your point, and the point on broadband is that we have ignored black communities and certain brown communities that have had not access to the internet. Suddenly, when we've seen that this is an issue in rural white communities, it's come to the surface. The same thing you could say about jobs, right? I mean, William Julius Wilson was writing in the 1990s that the breakdown of many of the African-American communities was not about family breakdown or other breakdown. It was jobs. When jobs left, communities broke down. And people didn't really take that seriously. And then suddenly when we had the loss of jobs in rural white communities, people suddenly said, oh, yeah, we have to take this really seriously. And this, in some ways, is Ta-Nehisi Coates' point that what is acceptable for minority communities is different than what is acceptable for white communities. And it's partly when people toss around this view of systemic racism, it can be vague. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that we have a different belief, a different expectation for different communities based on race. And we should understand why that is. It's not to cast blame, but how could you not have psyches affected when you've had hundreds of years of slavery and Jim Crow? It's normal for people to have conscious and unconscious bias. What we have to all do is recognize that and be intentional in solving it.
Yeah. And now that, absolutely. Back to the idea of multiracial democracies. I think that the only two countries that have that are really aggressively taking this on or facing this as a challenge, shall we say, are South Africa and the United States. And South Africa arguably is where the United States was, I don't mean literally politically where they were, but in terms of time, back in the Reconstruction era. I mean, you know, it's been very, very recently. Ronald Reagan supported apartheid in South Africa. The Republican Party's more or less official position was in support of apartheid in the you know, right up through the 80s. And South Africa is struggling with that now. We're struggling with this. You could say that it ended in the United States, you know, with the Civil War, but I would say that it really, you know, legal segregation ended in the 60s. How do we advance this? It seems to me that the core meme that works against pluralistic democracies is the meme that was adopted by white racists in both the United States and South Africa, that diversity equals weakness. And that if we can figure out a way to replace that meme right across the board, where it's embraced even by white people, that diversity equals strength in society, that's a good starting point. Do you have others? What are your thoughts on all that? We have about a minute and a half, by the way.
Well, I think that the first thing we have to do is recognize the historical injustices and be intentional in redress and reparations to make up for those historical injustices. And I think without that, you can't start to have a conversation about how you have equality of citizenship. And then the second thing we have to do is to have honest conversations about the need for a common American political culture, but also the need to represent identity and be proud of that identity. So for me, on a personal basis, it means I didn't have a problem, or our family didn't have a problem putting out Christmas lights with when others did on our neighborhood. But I've been very proud of my Hindu faith and would never compromise that in running for political office. That's my balance. Others may have had a different balance. And the point is, how do we have those conversations honestly and recognize different people may have different lines, and where we have a common American ground? And so I think that these are the challenges for our country. Absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. Congressman Ro Khanna, the Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman, thank you so much for dropping by and talking with me about this today.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's great talking with you, as always. Hang on just a second here. We'll be right back. It is a call for change day.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
It's that time of year where we celebrate Memorial Day. We memorialize the Americans who have died in our wars, in the Vietnam War, in the Iraq War, in the Afghanistan War, in the Gulf War, the earlier Iraq War, in the Korean War. If you add all of those wars together that I just named, the sum total of them is fewer than the number of people who have died in 3 months from COVID-19 virus on Donald Trump's watch. Isn't it time for us to memorialize
the Americans who have died and are continuing to die at the rate of, well over 1,000 a day as a result of the incompetence of Donald Trump. It seems like maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's the time to add COVID-19 victims. Because, after all, Trump says we're warriors, or maybe there should be a separate holiday. But something to think about. You'll find a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. I want to say a special word of thanks, a special thank you to those of you who have already called 877-378-8669 and made your contribution to Free Speech TV. We've had a number of people contribute. It is really heartwarming. It really means a lot, and it also is going to help us keep going. We're nowhere close to our goals. We still have a ways to go, and we'll be showing up every day until we finally hit them. But a lot of you have, and I just wanted to thank you. I don't think that I acknowledge people enough, just generally in my life and here too. It means a lot to all of us. And thank you so much for the help that you've been giving. If you haven't yet called Free Speech TV to say, yes, I watch programs on Free Speech TV, I watch the Thom Hartmann program, I get value from the Thom Hartmann program, I use some of the things he says in my interactions with others, I post stuff on Facebook or Twitter, or I tell my friends or whatever, and you haven't called Free Speech TV yet, please do. Please. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. This network does not exist if you don't support it. Yeah, you. Seriously. And we need your help. We need your help. We're behind. It costs money to run a network. I realize it's a tough time. I think I've talked about that probably way more than I need to over the last few fundraisers, so I'll just leave it at that. But please, if you can help out, call now. And you can also go to freespeech.org and contribute as well, but please do it now during the show. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number to support this extraordinary television network, the little engine that could. The work that they're doing is just spectacular. With a $20 gift, you get your choice of the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting, Are You car magnet. With a $50 gift, you get your choice of the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann mug with my mug on it, my face on it. With a $100 gift, you get the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. With a $120 gift, we've got a pile of choices for you. A whole bunch of different things that you can choose from. With a $120 gift, there's the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. There is Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. There's Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. There's Tim Wise's book, Dear White America. There is Paul Kivel's book, Uprooting Racism. Your choice, any of those premiums, any of those gifts, with a $120 gift. With a $240 gift, you can hang out with me and a couple of small number of other donors and a live Zoom conversation, and we can just have a candid conversation about the events of the day or whatever questions you may have or whatever you want to pitch to me. If you want me to know about something or think about something, this is the way to do it. And so the $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, the Hidden History of the War on Voting book, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting, Are You car magnet, and the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. All of that comes in the Thom Hartmann University box for $360. And with a $1,000 gift, when all this settles down, and hopefully that day will come when we've all had a vaccine or whatever it takes, come to Portland and hang out with us. You can watch the 3rd hour of the show, and we'll walk down the street to a nice little restaurant and have lunch together. So those are the premiums, basically, the gifts that are being offered by Free Speech TV. But the real gift from you to us is calling and making a contribution, be it a one-time contribution or a commitment for, to be a member of the Sustainers Group, a regular monthly contribution. And of course, our gift to you is all the work, and there's an enormous amount of work. Every Friday afternoon, I read the list of all the people on this show who work on this program. I think it's probably about 15 people. And over at Free Speech TV, you got a TV network. It's being run by something in the neighborhood of about 20 people. There's a bunch of us working on this program and on this network to bring this all to you. And if we make it look easy, that's great. That's an indication that we put the extra work in, because it's not easy. There's actually an enormous amount of time and effort that goes into producing 3 hours of good television programming. On my end, there's a lot of work. On the people who work with me, on Sean's end and Nate's end, and Patrick and Nigel and Sue and Geraldine and Dave and Joyce and over at Free Speech TV. It's no small thing, and we need your help to keep it going. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and share what you can with Free Speech TV. City Council President, Minneapolis City Council President Lisa Bender said that they are rethinking their police department. Let me get the actual tweet here. I've got the exact tweet. Hang on just a second. She says, first of all, she's retweeting another member of the council, Jeremiah Ellison, who says, we are going to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, and when we're done, we're not simply going to glue it back together. We're going to dramatically rethink how we approach public safety and emergency response. It's really past due. And then Lisa Bender, the president of the council, of the city council, says, yes, we are going to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department and replace it with a transformative new model of public safety. And that is real change. Well, we'll see, right? Hold your breath. But the school board, by the way, in Minneapolis voted unanimously to terminate their $1.1 million a year annual contract with the police for so-called school resource officers. About 40% of schools in the United States now have armed police, actual police officers in their schools, something that certainly never happened when I was growing up. And the outcome of this is that our children, particularly children of color, particularly black children, are being criminalized and entered into the criminal justice system. And the same thing is happening here in Portland, by the way. Portland has said no more cops in our schools. And huge demonstrations last night in Portland. The Burnside Bridge is one of the most iconic major arteries across the Willamette River in central downtown Portland. The city exists on both sides of the Willamette River, which then feeds into the Columbia, which separates us from Washington State and Vancouver, Washington to the north. The Willamette runs north-south, and it's on the east side and the west side. And the protesters, the pictures are all over the internet. They're just breathtaking. And people, laid down on the bridge for I believe it's 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that this murderous cop in Minneapolis used to kill George Floyd. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind today?
My father told me when I was a child to listen very carefully to what a man says. And the only thing that speaks more loudly than his voice is his silence. And as everyone in the country is having this kumbaya moment, it's still only us, meaning black people in America, dying. We're the only ones bleeding. And that leads me to ask you this question with regards to the collective silence. Why is there no discussion about black defense forces? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You notice that on tribal lands that they don't get killed by the police. You know why? Because they live there. They're in their own communities. You're not likely to go and abuse somebody and you've got to live next door to them. But yet all
there's
over
a
this
whole.
country,
Hang on just a second, Kenyatta. There's a whole legal infrastructure there. Tribal lands are separate nations. Police from outside of tribal lands have no authority on tribal lands, and vice versa. And I mean, there's a huge crisis in Native American communities where white people are going into Native American communities, robbing people, but more importantly, and probably more high profile, raping Native women, and then leaving. And the Native police forces can't chase them because they don't have authority outside, and the police forces outside will not, take control of their own people, and they're not interacting with the Native Americans. I'm not sure that's the best metaphor for you, but continue your riff here.
well, thank you. My riff is, I'm not. You've done that to me before, Tom. I won't take exception this time, because what I'm talking about is something that affects me, not you. And white people all over this country, you guys can sit there and proselytize and come up with all this other stuff that's rhetoric you want to. I'm saying that if black communities that are predominantly black, they should police their own. That's what I'm saying to you. I'm not necessarily saying that it needs to be exactly like a reservation. I think you know that I have enough legal expertise to understand the nuances in terms of the law. I'm talking about white people don't live in these communities. Why are you there? And you sat up on your own program and talked about it a few days ago. You said that when you were in Georgia with this, doing some police training, that you had guys that said, "Hey, we'd go over there and crack heads for free." That's the reality of it. I asked you on a previous program some years ago when we were doing the same thing. Go back through the years, Tom. It's the same thing over and over again. And you said, and I asked you the question, are black people Americans? And we got into this really heavy discussion about whether or not, the law part of it. Well, if you're born on American soil, I'm not talking about those nuances. Clearly, we are different, way different, because we're the only ones dying at the hands of the police. And finally, I want to say this to you, Tom. You are aware of the CHP officer. I know you are. The clip of the CHP officer that beat a woman to a bloody pulp, a black woman on the freeway with gloved hands. This man's about 250 pounds. Here's the reality. All this window dressing, I'm sick of it. Our white people, if you see me, and I'm 6'3", about 200 pounds, sitting on top, straddling your daughter, your wife, one of your women, and beating her with my hands to a bloody pulp, a defenseless woman, you're going to tell me you're going to go march, Tom? Is that what you're going to do?
Point made, and my apologies for going little professor on you on the reservation stuff. And yes, this is a point that not only am I making, lots of people are making, that 94% of the Minneapolis Police Department does not live in Minneapolis. Are you suggesting that only black officers should patrol black neighborhoods?
Predominantly black ones, yes. And in general, police officers should live in those neighborhoods. You are less likely when you live, most of the LAPD, they live in a place called Simi Valley. They call it Topland, okay, which is about 40 miles north of Los Angeles. You understand? And you see this repeated, this pattern all over the country, because they specifically go in to, as you put it in a previous program, knock heads. That's what they do. You're less likely to do that when you know I'm a few blocks away from your punk ass. You understand? That's what I'm talking about.
I absolutely do, and I agree. And the conundrum is the wrong word, but I guess the corollary to that would be that you're suggesting that white officers should patrol white areas. I mean, if we're going, and I know you have a background in policing, if we are committed going back to community policing, where people feel like the people who are serving them, not just policing them, are accessible, are part of their community, isn't that an opportunity for diversity, for people to have the experience of diversity as well?
I think so. But I'm good. I'm getting back to this. My point is that you are going to act a lot differently. I'm going to act a lot differently if I'm in your community. First of all, I have a vested interest in that community. as opposed to I'm a million miles away and I just go, why are you there? Why?
Yeah, I completely agree.
We talked about this the other day, and I'm going to say this real quick because I don't know if you're coming up on a break or not.
We only have 10 seconds.
Okay. We talked about police cars being black and white. You know what the white person said to me? Well, that doesn't mean anything. That's just the color of the car. Well, why is that the color of the car? Why? Given the history.
Yeah. Why not blue? Yeah, I get it.
See?
Kenyatta, thank you. It's always good talking with you. We'll be back in just a moment. It's 15 minutes past the hour. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, and it's a call for change here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Hashtag a call for change. And welcome back. John in Hillsboro, Oregon. Hey, John, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Well, back in 2017 or 18, the movie came out. It was called Detroit, like Detroit, Michigan. And it's a movie, not a documentary, but it's a true story about a Motown musician who was caught in these riots of '67. And in this program, there was research done on it. I saw a documentary on it before I saw the movie. Cops were indiscriminately, and even the 101st Airborne Division, which was deployed by LBJ, they were discriminately going around just shooting any black that was on the street, murdering. And it has a scene in there where this cop was caught, killing somebody just out of his freaking, car. And his supervisor says, you just can't go around killing these, right now. You just can't go. I mean, like he didn't charge him for murder or whatever. He just says, you just can't go around.
When was this movie made, John?
2017, 2018.
Really? It's recent?
Yeah.
Or is it supposed to portray another time and another era? Or is that supposed to be now?
Well, it was a movie. It was all black cast. Well, of course, there wasn't all black, and it had some. I didn't recognize hardly anybody in there because they're just recent stars, whatever.
Yeah.
And
I can't. It sounds interesting, John. I'll have to check it out.
But it was just the way the attitude that they portrayed. The cops just went out there and just shot people in the head for nothing.
Yeah, well, they know that they have immunity. The Supreme Court gave it to them in 1982, and society has been giving it to them since the days of the Slave Patrol. John, thanks for the call. David in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, two callers called in, and my sister-in-law is black, and my nieces are black, and I'm worried about their safety, even though I'm white. So I have the black problem. So... another caller, I won't actually say what you called in, but you reminded me of like an alcoholic. You have an alcoholic father, and instead of changing your own thinking, you want the alcoholic to change. I think wanting the police to change is alcoholic thinking. Now, I think the rest of us need to think about how we're going to change, which means that these protests continue until we get what we want. I mean, Los Angeles made a step to reducing their police budget by $150 million. I think it needs to be a lot more. I think these policemen being drunks on violence need to think about getting other jobs. In 2008, when state and local budgets were lowered, you didn't fire the police; they fired everybody else. They fired teachers, firemen. Our quality of life went down. I don't see how in the technological world where you can have ADT security and whatnot, or people are so rich they can have their own security, that we need so many police. I think the mindset doesn't need to be changing them. I think we need to be recovering from this abuse, and we need to think about our thinking. We don't need separate police. We need to eliminate the police or lower the amounts and rebuild our society.
That's a remarkable analogy, David, that had never occurred to me, that our police are drunk on violence the same way that alcoholics are drunk on alcohol. and that a similar recovery process will be necessary. Perhaps even sudden withdrawal. David, thank you for the call. That's a thought-provoking one. We'll be right back.
We can't go back to normal. We need a call for change.
So over at ThomHartmann.com, we just put up a new video for our supporters, the people who support our program, that talks about Malcolm X saying, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are oppressed and loving the people who are the oppressors. He said that 55 years ago to, this month, February, 1965. And, what that actually means, how that warning from Malcolm X was apparently taken to heart by the Republican Party in 1981 through the Reagan presidency. And we actually saw this shift in America to the point where, that led to everything. Stop and frisk and the demonization of homeless people and the demonization of poor people and black people and Muslim people and all of this stuff came out of this very specific kind of Lee Atwater strategy in the 1980s. So you can find it over at ThomHartmann.com and check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Dr. Robin Cooper, the president of Teamsters Local 502, the Commonwealth Association of School Administrators. The website is local502casa.org. And Dr. Cooper, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us. And Dr. Cooper, if you could, I see noted here that you are the first woman and the first African American to lead this union, the Commonwealth Association of School Administrators. First, could you tell us a little bit about the Commonwealth of School Administrators?
Well, we are the only. First of all, thank you for having me. We are the only administrators union in the entire state of Pennsylvania. We're made up of approximately 700 administrators, from principals, assistant principals, climate managers, food service workers, early childhood. We go on and on. We have one employer, that's the school district of Philadelphia, and I represent their needs.
I understand that your group, I believe it was, today held a silent march to protest the murder of George Floyd and denounce racial injustice and inequality. Do I have that right?
Yep. We had a march on yesterday. It was called Gasping for Breath, Justice and Change. And we really wanted the families, our school families, to understand and know that we denounce racism in its strongest form. And we wanted to be there for our families and really to provide, just a strong stance to let children know that we're here to talk to them about some of the turmoil that they're going through, because we recognize racism and we want them to know that we recognize it. So we didn't want to be the silent elephant in the room.
It seems to me that in our schools there are kind of two levels of issue here to address. From an administrator's point of view, which you're reflecting, there are this, how the school is structured, and one piece of that. I live in Portland, Oregon. Our school system has just said we're no longer going to have police officers in our schools. I've been speaking out against police officers in schools for as long as it's become a fad here over at least the last decade on this program. But then there's also the issue in the classroom with the teachers. And even the monitoring is probably the wrong word, but the conversation, not just of teachers and not just conversation, the actual instruction about racism and the history of racism in the United States to students, but also the interactions between students around the issues of race. Can you speak to all of that?
Well, I think as school districts around the nation we've become so focused on, teaching to the test, and everything is about the test. So most educators, their days are filled up with reading and math, and that's it. So, social studies would have been a perfect opportunity to really talk in depth about racism. And, there just doesn't appear to be time for it. But I just think with so many things that are going on, social studies, you would be able to have current events. You would be able to talk about these issues. And because all of that is by the wayside, children's, their individual needs are not being met to express themselves, who they are, and really to channel their energy in a positive way and feel affirmed that somebody hears and somebody is talking to them about these things. I mean, we're not just talking about the death of George Floyd. We're talking about the death of Breonna Taylor. We're talking about the death of Ahmaud Arbery, all which happened in the month of May. And so just adding that on to, a COVID-19 where our children are not in school and they're handling all of this, it's difficult for the adults to really understand what's going on. But even in the school setting, it would be very difficult to push aside the curriculum to talk about things that we need to talk about and really address. Because here's the reality. Our children are aware of race, and they know when there's an injustice being committed. And when people don't talk about it, then you have all of that anger, all of that rage that's going inward. So we want to make sure that we stand in solidarity with our children to say, we hear you and we want to talk about this. We have to talk about it.
Yeah. I'm old enough to remember in the late 60s when high schools, at least in Michigan, where my wife and I grew up, Black Studies was required in an all-white school, or largely all-white school. Is there any chance we can return to that? I realize Betsy DeVos is not going to be promoting this, but shouldn't we be talking about that?
We really should. We need a well-rounded curriculum that really speaks to all aspects of life. For whatever reason, the only thing that's important in our school district is reading and math, and you have to really, talk about some of the major issues. A few years ago in Texas, the history books basically said that slaves, they enjoyed their lives, that they wanted to be slaves, they were well fed, and they, nothing could be further from the truth. So we also, in returning to it, we have to straighten out the books to make sure it has adequate and accurate information.
Brilliant. Dr. Robin Cooper, the president of the Commonwealth Association of School Administrators, Teamsters Local 502, Local 502, CASA.org. And Dr. Cooper, thanks so much for dropping by today. It's been fascinating. Thank you.
You are more than welcome.
Thank you. We'll be back with more of the news of the day in our conversations in just a moment.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's a call for change here on the Thom Hartmann Program and also on Sirius XM Progress 127 across the channel, across the day. We'll be back. I want to say a special word of thanks, a special thank you to those of you who have already called 877-378-8669 and made your contribution to Free Speech TV. We've had a number of people contribute. It is really heartwarming. It really means a lot, and it also is going to help us keep going. We're nowhere close to our goals. We still have a ways to go, and we'll be showing up every day until we finally hit them. But a lot of you have, and I just wanted to thank you. I don't think that I acknowledge people enough, just generally in my life and here too. It means a lot to all of us. And thank you so much for the help that you've been giving. If you haven't yet called Free Speech TV to say, yes, I watch programs on Free Speech TV, I watch the Thom Hartmann Program, I get value from the Thom Hartmann Program, I use some of the things he says in my interactions with others, I post stuff on Facebook or Twitter, or I tell my friends or whatever, and you haven't called Free Speech TV yet, please do. Please. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. This network does not exist if you don't support it. Yeah, you. Seriously. And we need your help. We need your help. We're behind. It costs money to run a network. I realize it's a tough time. I think I've talked about that probably way more than I need to over the last few fundraisers, so I'll just leave it at that. But please, if you can help out, call now. And you can also go to freespeech.org and contribute as well, but please do it now during the show. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number to support this extraordinary television network, the little engine that could. The work that they're doing is just spectacular. With a $20 gift, you get your choice of the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting, Are You car magnet. With a $50 gift, you get your choice of the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann mug with my mug on it, my face on it. With a $100 gift, you get the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. With a $120 gift, we've got a pile of choices for you. A whole bunch of different things that you can choose from. With a $120 gift, there's the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. There is Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. There's Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. There's Tim Wise's book, Dear White America. There is Paul Kivel's book, Uprooting Racism. Your choice, any of those premiums, any of those gifts, with a $120 gift. With a $240 gift, you can hang out with me and a couple of small number of other donors and a live Zoom conversation, and we can just, have a candid conversation about the events of the day or whatever questions you may have or whatever you want to pitch to me. If you want me to know about something or think about something, this is the way to do it. And so the $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, the Hidden History of the War on Voting book, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting, Are You car magnet, and the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. All of that comes in the Thom Hartmann University box for $360. And with a $1,000 gift, when all this settles down, and hopefully that day will come when we've all had a vaccine or whatever it takes, come to Portland and hang out with us. You can watch the 3rd hour of the show, and we'll walk down the street to a nice little restaurant and have lunch together. So those are the premiums, basically, the gifts that are being offered by Free Speech TV. But the real gift from you to us is calling and making a contribution, be it a one-time contribution or a commitment for, to be a member of the Sustainers group, a regular monthly contribution. And of course, our gift to you is all the work, and there's an enormous amount of work. Every Friday afternoon, I read the list of all the people on this show who work on this program. I think it's probably about 15 people. And over at Free Speech TV, you got a TV network. It's being run by something in the neighborhood of about 20 people. There's a bunch of us working on this program and on this network to bring this all to you. And if we make it look easy, that's great. That's an indication that we put the extra work in, because it's not easy. There's actually an enormous amount of time and effort that goes into producing 3 hours of good television programming. On my end, there's a lot of work. On the people who work with me, on Sean's end and Nate's end, and Patrick and Nigel and Sue and Geraldine and Dave and Joyce and over at Free Speech TV. It's no small thing, and we need your help to keep it going. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and share what you can with Free Speech TV.
Today, we're coming together to call for change.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Kimon Freeman is online with us, program director and host at We Act Radio, our affiliate in Washington, D.C., and activist with Black Lives Matter D.C. WeActRadio.com is the website. And Guerrilla Artist and BLK Lives Matter are Twitter handles, and also at We Act Radio. Kimon, welcome back to the program. I'm wondering, first of all, you were I believe you were there when Bill Barr ordered the clearing of that area so that Donald Trump could do his photo op. Do I have that right?
You have it absolutely right. We were at the exclusive announcement. It was the first media outlet to report that. And upon his arrival, surrounded by Secret Service agents, of course, he spoke to all the white shirts, the men in charge. And as soon as he left, that's when all hell broke loose. And I unfortunately witnessed young people being beaten with batons that didn't move fast enough. They started shooting rubber bullets. I was hit with a tear gas canister projectile in my leg. And they had horses out there, and it was chaos. And one of my producers, Will Ugart, said that, has this picture of me, claiming that I'm calmly strolling through tear gas. And that was because, I've been in Ferguson. I've been in these situations before. But these young people, half my age out there, they was afraid of their lives. They was afraid for their lives. And it was pure chaos created on the part of police violence.
Yeah. You want to describe what it's like to be tear gassed?
Well, the first time it is terrifying. But when you're prepared for it, you got the goggles. You have the information that a lot of Palestinians and other activists from around the world and the Chinese activists in Hong Kong shared, and how to deal with it. It's a much more common effect. But for those who don't know, milk in the eyes get the tear gas out you. Using those the construction cones, street cones, to cover the tear gas canister, and you can pour water directly on it and it douses out. When you have the information, like anything else, you're better prepared and you can deal with it. But when you don't, and you don't have any protective gear, it is probably one of the most burning sensations you can ever imagine in your eyes. I've seen people vomit. Some people have collapsed, if you're asthmatic or have any type of respiratory illness. And then, of course, you combine that with the COVID-19, which would further exacerbate anyone with conditions. It's just a recipe for disaster. And I want to remind everyone that this was a peaceful protest, and there was violently attacked, and it's all on camera.
Yeah, and we're looking at police riots all over the United States against peaceful protesters, people exercising their First Amendment right to peaceably assemble and petition their government for redress of grievance.
And journalists.
Talking with Kimon Freeman. Yeah. Which is another, essentially protected class, as it were, in the First Amendment, right? Although it does say Congress shall make no law. It doesn't say the president shall not, but I think it's clearly implicit. Your mayor in Washington, D.C., my mayor for 7 years when I lived there, Muriel Bowser, has just done something extraordinary. Tell us about 16th Street. What's going on there?
Well, first, I don't want to leave out our council chairman. In D.C., we have 13 council members and a mayor, and the chairman of that council is almost as powerful as the mayor. And he has come out in a statement aggressively denouncing the police violence and in full support of the protesters. I just want to give Chairman Phil Middleton a shout-out for doing so. But Mayor Bowser, what you're referring to, has taken the extraordinary step of painting the title of Black Lives Matter on 16th Street. And for those who don't know, 16th Street is the Meridian line in Washington, D.C. It's a diamond-shaped district, and that 16th Street runs directly into the White House. So she has effectively painted Black Lives Matter on the doorsteps of the White House.
Yeah, and in giant letters on the street.
Yeah, it's like 3 blocks long.
Yeah, it's huge. And then they're also putting up signs. They've renamed that part of it as Black Lives Matter Plaza. Do I get that right?
Well, that's news to me. I don't have that information. I haven't been down to the White House today, but I will be there shortly. But the Black Lives Matter 3 blocks long painting on the street, full size, both lanes, is accurate.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. Come on, where do we go from here? With regard to D.C. and with regard to this national movement in general, to both bring about racial justice and also to deal with the violence of policing against black people.
Well, we have to look back to go forward, and I would urge your audience to pick up Martin Luther King's last book, and it was Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? There's a lot of answers in that book, and it's given me a lot of solace in going forward. But to pull from his letter from Birmingham jail, he said that direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. And unfortunately, this week we heard from Barack Obama break his silence, but he was careful not to call the protesters thugs this time, but he stopped short of confronting the issue. And the issue is police violence, and he hasn't done anything to address that. I'd like to applaud our former president, Jimmy Carter, who has done a much better job in doing that and raising that issue. But to answer your question directly, we don't even have a national database in this country, a federal database, because they can't. The FBI has even testified. Furthermore, I want to make sure people know that the FBI has reported in 2006 that law enforcement has been infiltrated by white supremacists, quote unquote, and everyone has seemed to ignore that report. But he went on to testify that there's no database for police shootings. He couldn't answer how many people have been shot by police because he doesn't have that data. There needs to be a national database. That's the first thing. And then I got my personal top 5. We need to have a legitimate citizen review board with hiring and firing powers. We have a few, but they are paper tigers that don't have that power. We need to require a significant percentage. I heard one of your callers say this earlier. Require a significant percentage of police that work in the community live in that community. I don't think it should be defined by race, but you live there. If you live there, then you should work there. And people always want to denounce that as that being unconstitutional or not appropriate. But any politician has to live in the area that he represents. The mayor has to live in the city that she represents. Why not the police? And then we need to have an automatic expulsion for loss of life of any unarmed person who is innocent of any felonious wrongdoing, subject to further prosecution. And then we need to have acknowledge that millions of dollars are given out every single year in every single city for police brutality and misconduct, but that money comes out of taxpayers' money. It doesn't come out of the police department's budget, and it surely doesn't come out of the police officers in question's salary. If that happened, you would get a change in road police behavior overnight. And finally, we need to have public input into city negotiations for the all-powerful police unions.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to get to that. I mean, it strikes me as bizarre that we have national standards for, there's basically two categories of people who literally hold your life in their hands: doctors and cops. And by law, they have the power to do things that might kill you. And doctors, I mean, there are national standards, accreditation standards. They have to have liability insurance. It's called malpractice insurance. If a doctor, has a horrible history, they lose their ability to practice. We have nothing like that for police, and a large part of that are these police unions. And I was amazed this week to learn. I thought I should have known this for years, but that a lot of these police unions are not actually even organized as unions under the National Labor Relations Act of 1930, whatever it was, 35, I think it is. Instead they're quote benevolent associations. They're basically protection rackets to defend bad cops and buy off politicians. I mean, in New York they've shoveled over $1 million to Cuomo. What's going on in D.C. with regard to this, and how do we take this on at a national level? We just have a minute to go here, Kimon.
Well, to be honest with you, even with the support of the mayor and the chairman of the D.C. Council, they're making a clear distinction between the Metropolitan Police Department, our local police department, and the federal officers who were responsible for the brutality at the White House. But unfortunately, a lot of these bad apples exist in all of the barrels across America, and we do need to have a consistent engagement in terms of police brutality, and we need to reform all police unions so they can all play by the same handbook. And I just want to say that this is not going to go away. We are emancipating ourselves, and it's not game over, it's game on. And it's just going to get worse because we have 35-40% of all the residents in the city, and I'm sure in other cities across America, who are behind in their rent and mortgages, and you can't evict 40% of a city. That would be even more chaotic. So I like to urge cancel rent campaigns before the violence escalates. And then, of course, for all those who can't make it out to the protest, we have been organizing at 7 o'clock, 8 minutes and 46 seconds of musical protest, and people can join in just like the New York City residents applauded their healthcare workers every day. Drums for Justice is the hashtag. Drums for Justice, 7 p.m. Your musical protest will provide a national support for all of the resistance that's going on right here today in our lifetime.
8 minutes and 46 seconds.
8 minutes, 46 seconds of your favorite musical protest song, because we're trying to remain awake during a great revolution.
Yeah, it sounds like a plan. Real quick, a lot of us seems to be, well, I'm sorry, I'm out of time. Kimon Freeman, Kimon, program director and host over at We Act Radio, our affiliate in Washington, D.C., activist at Black Lives Matter, D.C., weactradio.com. And Kimon, thanks so much for dropping by. It's always great talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep up the great work, my friend. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's see here. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
I'm just wanting to mention that this is not all just about the, killing of black men. It's the killing of the middle class for the past 40 years that has hit people up in arms as much as anything. And what we're going to have to do to push Joe Biden to be the next FDR is what we need to do. And, we can't settle for $12 an hour or lowering the middle Medicare to 60. We can't get that piecemeal stuff they've been offering all these years. We need a much bigger chunk, and how we're going to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm all in favor of progressive change, and I would love to see a new deal, and I'd love to see Joe Biden produce one. I think that his choice of vice president is going to tell us a lot, but the reality is also that we have some voice in all this, and we need to be using that voice as much as possible. Michelle in Van Nuys, California. Hey, Michelle, what's up?
I basically wanted to say how the real change in the police departments has to come from the top down. In Los Angeles, we have the sheriff's department, which is the county, and in the last election for sheriff, Villanueva came in. And right after he was elected, he reinstated more than a dozen officers who had been fired for cause for things like abuse and other things. And he's fighting right now with the county supervisors about that. They're requesting documents and records regarding this, and he's refusing to give the records of why he's rehired these officers. They want to see the police files of these people, the employee files, basically.
Wow. Probably a pretty bad time for a police chief to be trying to pull off this kind of thing.
This all happened before. Like, this has been going on for months now.
Right. Is this the city of Van Nuys, or is it a county, or what's the jurisdiction?
It's the county of Los Angeles. So the county of Los Angeles encompasses the city of Los Angeles. So the city of Los Angeles has its police chief, and he governs just the city. Then you have the county, which is a lot of unincorporated areas, but everybody in the city also votes for the sheriff. So the county has the sheriff's department. And so Villanueva is the sheriff.
Is he one of those? Is he a member of one of those sheriff's groups that these kind of fringe groups, like Sheriff Mack, we've had on the show a couple times, leader of these guys who think that the sheriffs are the ultimate law enforcement authorities in America and the only true ones and all that kind of stuff? Or is he
I don't know. That hasn't been really. I haven't seen anything reported on that. But when he did campaign, he had the support of all the sheriff's underlings and things like that. So that was one of the things that all the people underneath him saw him as somebody coming back in to protect them.
Right. So he was running as a cop's cop. Was there no strong opposition, or was he facing multiple opponents and therefore?
No, there was an incumbent sheriff who was actually trying to make some changes, which is why the people underneath were going for him.
That's why they wanted to get him back in. Thanks for the heads up on that, Michelle. I'll have to do a little educating of myself on the topic. I appreciate the call, though, and thanks for the heads up. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with your calls in just a moment.
Today is a day of action. Today is a call for change.
We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and the essence of it is, I use a couple of examples. There's hundreds of them out there. In one case, Alabama is preparing to execute a man who was not guilty of the crime that he committed with a relatively high level of certainty, but still they're gonna kill this guy, an African American. And the other story out of New York State, where the police officers hogtied this guy, elbows behind him, tied his legs together, and then threw him down a flight of stairs, mangled his face. He looked he was totally beaten. 12 hours later, he commits suicide in his cell. How is it possible that our prisons do this kind of stuff? Because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still legal in the United States. You have no rights if you've been convicted of a crime. We need to amend the Constitution. Check it out at thomhartmann.com.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Deborah in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Deborah, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I'm worried about the protesters and the police. And I was watching Rachel Maddow this morning, and she was talking about these soldiers that they were all dressed up in like riot gear, and they didn't have any identification.
No ID. Right.
No ID. And the reason why I'm concerned about this is, why are they there? And back in, when Scott Walker was governor of Wisconsin, somebody called in and was pranking him, saying that they were one of the Koch brothers. And Scott Walker didn't know that it was a prankster. And he was telling who he thought was the Koch brothers that they were planning a disturbance. They were going to stage a disturbance so that some people can be arrested and then blame it on the Democrats. And I kind of feel like that's what these people are there for. They're going to stage something. And let me tell you why, because just I don't know what channel I was watching, but they were saying that there was a white van with supposedly some police officers that were taking bricks out of the van and lining them up on the side of the road. And why else would they be there? I mean, because they're an army for hire. So my question to you is this. If something like this happens, because it happens at nighttime, not during the day because they're peaceful, right? What would, in something like this happen, the police and the protesters are going to get caught in the middle, and would Donald Trump be able to declare martial law? And because of this, and the thing is that you wouldn't be able to identify anybody. And the thing that I'm worried about is that, what about our own military? Our military, would they be able to go in and fight these guys? Because they're American citizens. I mean, and the people that are going to get hurt are going to be the protesters and the police, the protesters
Right.
and the police, and it could be all staged.
Yeah, it's conceivable. You know, what Rachel was referring to in her show last night was the Little Green Men. And the Little Green Men was when the Donbass, the eastern part of Ukraine, which is heavily populated, as a result of the events after World War II, heavily populated by ethnic Russians as opposed to ethnic Ukrainians. And Russian is the principal language that's spoken there. And all these military guys were popping up in this eastern region who were wearing green uniforms with no insignia, no badges, no name, nothing. You couldn't identify them. And, to this day, there's still a debate. The Putin government, the Russian government, denies that they were actually, Russian soldiers who were there to foment uprising. And I don't know the position of the Trump administration, but the Obama administration was certainly taking the position that that's exactly what they were. And I don't think that we know to this day whether they were a local paramilitary force, a la Hitler's brown shirts, who were all volunteers, by the way, or whether it was soldiers coming in from Russia. But the point is, there was no accountability, and you can't track it back. The story that I'm hearing right now is that these guys are from the Bureau of Prisons, that they are essentially SWAT teams that the prisons use when there's a riot. They come into the prisons from outside. They're particularly brutal. They're trained in crowd suppression and in riot suppression. And keep in mind, the 13th Amendment ended slavery in the United States except in prisons. And it explicitly says that the 13th Amendment allows slavery to continue if a person has been convicted of a crime. And so all your constitutional protections are gone in prison. So these guys are trained in a completely different world than what they're encountering in the streets of Washington, D.C., where presumably all of us have human rights and civil rights. And that Bill Barr brought these guys out. And if that's true, if these are prison riot squads, and if they were brought in by Bill Barr, and if he did order them to be without identification, and I don't think that Trump could have done this. He would have to have it done by somebody. And frankly, I don't think Trump is smart enough to have done this. And I use that word advisedly, but you know what I'm talking about. Then that's a very, very scary thing. I mean, this is what authoritarian regimes do. This is what fascistic regimes do. We're seeing increasingly the F word being used in mainstream media. In the New York Times, the Washington Post, it's time to start using the fascist word. Tom Cotton's op-ed in the New York Times 2 days ago is being referred to as fascistic. In fact, there was a headline in the Washington Post, I believe, last night referring to it as fascistic. This troubles me tremendously, Deborah. I don't have any answers for you. But I share your concerns and Rachel's concerns, and I think what should be all of America's concerns. The Democrats, both Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, have demanded that the White House tell them what's going on, exercising the oversight that the Constitution provides to Congress, and the Trump administration basically is flipping them the one-finger salute, and which they should not have the right or power to do. So we're watching our democracy being taken apart. Our institutions of governance be taken apart step by step right in front of us. Deborah, thank you for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
It's that time of year where we celebrate Memorial Day. We memorialize the Americans who have died in our wars. in the Vietnam War, in the Iraq War, in the Afghanistan War, in the Gulf War, the earlier Iraq War, in the Korean War. If you add all of those wars together that I just named, the sum total of them is fewer than the number of people who have died in 3 months from COVID-19 virus on Donald Trump's watch. Isn't it time for us to memorialize the Americans who have died and are continuing to die at the rate of, well over 1,000 a day as a result of the incompetence of Donald Trump? It seems like maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's the time to add COVID-19 victims. Because, after all, Trump says we're warriors, or maybe there should be a separate holiday. But something to think about. You'll find a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. I want to say a special word of thanks, a special thank you to those of you who have already called 877-378-8669 and made your contribution to Free Speech TV. We've had a number of people contribute. It is really heartwarming. It really means a lot, and it also is going to help us keep going. We're nowhere close to our goals. We still have a ways to go, and we'll be showing up every day until we finally hit them. But a lot of you have, and I just wanted to thank you. I don't think that I acknowledge people enough, just generally in my life and here too. It means a lot to all of us. And thank you so much for the help that you've been giving. If you haven't yet called Free Speech TV to say, yes, I watch programs on Free Speech TV, I watch the Thom Hartmann Program, I get value from the Thom Hartmann Program, I use some of the things he says in my interactions with others, I post stuff on Facebook or Twitter, or I tell my friends or whatever, and you haven't called Free Speech TV yet, please do. Please. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. This network does not exist if you don't support it. Yeah, you. Seriously. And we need your help. We need your help. We're behind. It costs money to run a network. I realize it's a tough time. I think I've talked about that probably way more than I need to over the last few fundraisers, so I'll just leave it at that. But please, if you can help out, call now. And you can also go to freespeech.org and contribute as well, but please do it now during the show. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number to support this extraordinary television network, the little engine that could. The work that they're doing is just spectacular. With a $20 gift, you get your choice of the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting, Are You car magnet. With a $50 gift, you get your choice of the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann mug with my mug on it, my face on it. With a $100 gift, you get the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. With a $120 gift, we've got a pile of choices for you, a whole bunch of different things that you can choose from. With a $120 gift, there's the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. There is Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. There's Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. There's Tim Wise's book, Dear White America. There is Paul Kivel's book, Uprooting Racism. Your choice, any of those premiums, any of those gifts, with a $120 gift. With a $240 gift, you can hang out with me and a couple of small number of other donors and a live Zoom conversation, and we can just have a candid conversation about the events of the day or whatever questions you may have or whatever you want to pitch to me. If you want me to know about something or think about something, this is the way to do it. And so the $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting book, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting, Are You car magnet, and the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. All of that comes in the Thom Hartmann University box for $360. And with a $1,000 gift, when all this settles down, and hopefully that day will come when we've all had a vaccine or whatever it takes, come to Portland and hang out with us. You can watch the third hour of the show, and we'll walk down the street to a nice little restaurant and have lunch together. So those are the premiums, basically, the gifts that are being offered by Free Speech TV. But the real gift from you to us is calling and making a contribution, be it a one-time contribution or a commitment for, to be a member of the Sustainers Group, a regular monthly contribution. And of course, our gift to you is all the work, and there's an enormous amount of work. Every Friday afternoon, I read the list of all the people on this show who work on this program. I think it's probably about 15 people. And over at Free Speech TV, you got a TV network. It's being run by something in the neighborhood of about 20 people. There's a bunch of us working on this program and on this network to bring this all to you. And if we make it look easy, that's great. That's an indication that we put the extra work in, because it's not easy. There's actually an enormous amount of time and effort that goes into producing 3 hours of good television programming. On my end, there's a lot of work. On the people who work with me, on Sean's end and Nate's end, and Patrick and Nigel and Sue and Geraldine and Dave and Joyce and over at Free Speech TV. It's no small thing, and we need your help to keep it going. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and share what you can with Free Speech TV.
European banks and governments were now rushing to redeem American notes for gold. The Edge of Anarchy by Jack Kelly.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. One of my daughters was an EMT and now is a physician's assistant. Breonna Taylor, whose 27th birthday would have been today, was an EMT and was working on becoming a nurse. We are all, in so many ways, so connected. George Floyd, of course, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others. We are mourning the death of so many of our black brothers and sisters at the hands of the police. Meanwhile, Donald Trump came out this morning and invoked George Floyd's name. He said the unemployment numbers are down to 13-point-something%, which is better than it was, yesterday, the official numbers. And therefore, he says, George Floyd would be looking down and smiling, or words to that effect. I agree with Joe Biden, who came out this morning and said for the president to try to put any other word. He said George Floyd's last words were, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. I actually think his last words were calling out to his mother. But in any case, the effect is the same. So Joe Biden says those were his last words. And then he says for the president to try to put any other words in the mouth of George Floyd, I frankly think is despicable. Agreed. It's a call for change day here. And to the unemployment numbers, my colleague over on SiriusXM, in fact, he was on our program yesterday, Dean Obadala, tweeted this morning the answer, and I'm just astonished that nobody is talking about this. If there are 100 people and 63 of, I'm just using that metaphor. I'm just going to mangle things. So let me just talk about the labor participation rate. The labor participation rate is the number of people who either hold a job or are looking for a job. So it's our labor force. And the number of people holding a job or looking for a job is held fairly steady since 2014. In 2014, in January, 62.9%. It was down to 62.8% by December of 2014. It was back up to 62.9% in January 2015. Went down to 62.7% at the end of 2015. 2016, it went from 62.7 to 62.7%. 2018, it went from 62.7% to 63%. In 2019, now this is, more people coming into the labor force because the economy was kind of on a sugar high. In 2019, it started at 63.2%, and ended at 63.2%. And in February of this year, it was 63.4%. So that's the total number of people who have a job or are looking for a job. And then your unemployment rate is which percent of those people are looking for a job versus have a job. And what they're saying right now is, well, it's 13%. But the labor participation rate last month dropped to 60%, 60.2. It dropped 3 points. And January, February, March, April, May. And in May, last month, like I said, that was the month before last, that was April, 60.2%, and in May it was 60.8%. So when we say that unemployment has gone down compared to the previous months or the previous quarter, we're not comparing apples to apples. The number of people in the workforce has gone down, and it's not because they died off. It's because they've given up looking. There's nothing out there. So when people stop looking for a job, there are fewer people looking for a job, and therefore unemployment isn't as bad. I mean, here, Dean Obeidallah, who tweeted out these numbers, just in his tweet actually, said it much more simply than I did, and here's what he said. You can find his tweet on Twitter, Dean Obeidallah. Why did unemployment rate drop? Simple. Millions stopped looking for a job. In January, 63.4% of Americans were in the labor force. Now it's 60.8%. Thank you, Dean. Well said. So here's Donald Trump saying that George Floyd is looking down from heaven and smiling because the unemployment rate has gone down, when in fact the number of unemployed people might have been reduced slightly, but I'm not seeing it. Are you? Maybe, maybe some people are going back to work, and wouldn't that be nice and all that sort of thing. But frankly, in terms of, reopening an economy, one of the things that we're learning from the experience, in particularly of European countries and Israel, who have been doing really good jobs of publishing numbers, and South Korea and Taiwan as well, is that most of the spread of COVID-19 happens when there is a person who is infected, typically who doesn't know that they're infected. Sometimes it's a person who's actively sick, but more often than not, somebody doesn't know that they're infected and is shedding virus like crazy in a confined area with a lot of people. These are called super spreading events. So they're in a confined area and they're surrounded by a lot of people. And in particular, if they're speaking loudly or singing. Now, this is not unique to COVID-19. The same is true of flu, same is true of the common cold, same is true of measles. They're called super spreader events, and we've known about this for probably 100 years. And now we've identified that this is going on here. And it turns out that there's two simple things that you can do that break a large chunk of that chain. One is wearing a mask, not so much to avoid inhaling virus particles, but to avoid exhaling them if you're one of the ones who's infected and doesn't know it. Because if you don't exhale them, nobody else is going to be inhaling them. Because if somebody near you is exhaling them, and even if your mask is stopping them, they're getting on your mask. And if you touch your mask and then touch your face, boom, you're screwed anyway. And the mask isn't going to stop all of them. So we wear masks to protect others. We've had this conversation 100 times, but the point is that wearing masks and not being in large groups of people are the ways to stop super spreading events. I'm very, very concerned about what we're seeing with these protests. I'm all in favor of the protests, but I'm really worried that we're going to see some real bad infection rates 6, 8, 10 weeks down the road from now. And frankly, with Bill Barr, apparently, somebody in the federal law enforcement chain of command stopping the delivery of face masks to Black Lives Matter groups in 4 different cities, literally seizing these masks after they had been shipped from the manufacturer, after they had been paid for. These people raised tens of thousands of dollars from volunteers to buy these masks for people to participate in these protests, and federal law enforcement seized them and is holding them right now as we speak. Now, what does that tell you about the intention of the Trump administration? Just think about that for a minute. The number one way, Japan never completely closed down. What did they do? Everyone wore masks, and they basically got things under control. South Korea, Taiwan, the principal mechanism that is being used, Israel, other countries, European countries, the principal mechanism that is being used to prevent the spread of this disease is having everybody wear masks. It will massively, it drops that R0 number, the number of people one person can infect, drops it way, way below 1. And somebody in the Trump administration, federal law enforcement, is saying, no, we're going to seize these masks. We're going to use our police powers to seize these masks. It's amazing. We'll pick up your calls after the break. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, where we ask, is Walmart a person? And we say, no, not a chance. No way. Forget it. We'll be back. And welcome back. Jonathan in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Jonathan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. One of the reasons I love listening to your show, and I'm sure a lot of people do, is because you're such a student of history. You teach us a lot of things. You have great books on history. And a period of history that I'd like to learn about, maybe you'd write a book about, is the period of Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction period. I find that really vital to understanding what's going on today. And the reason being is between, and this, of course, this is beyond Reconstruction, but 1882 to 1868, there were 200 anti-lynching bills introduced into Congress. Only 3 passed the House. 7 presidents petitioned to pass a federal law. Nothing was passed. And the Tuskegee Institute has records of about over 4,000 lynchings, but a quarter of those, about 1,200, are actually lynchings of white people. And the reason being is that those white people were trying to protect the voting rights of black people. And particularly in the 1870s, President Grant had used various means to help black people vote. There was something called the Enforcement Act in 1870 and the Civil Rights Act of 1871, which is actually known as the Ku Klux Klan Act, because the Klan was trying to suppress Republican votes, which, of course, at the time were now we call them Democrats. But so there's a lot of history, and even if you look at like Italian immigrants who were considered black, actually they weren't even considered white. 300,000 living in New Orleans, and on one day, 11 Italians were lynched. So this is a complex history. Roosevelt spoke out vehemently against lynching in the early 1900s. And Teddy Roosevelt, exactly, yeah. Although Franklin did establish a civil rights department in the late 30s in the Justice Department to try to prosecute lynchings, never succeeded, and I guess by the mid-40s, lynchings had already started to wane. But all of that.
Jonathan, you sound really well informed about this. I'm peripherally familiar with about 3/4 of what you've talked about, but I'd love to read a good readable history of that time. Do you have any suggestions?
No, I don't. But, you've done such a brilliant job in all of your other books, and I just think you'd probably tear this one up. This is what I feel. We were talking about violence, and I think the most pernicious violence of all is propaganda and misinformation. That's a form of violence. And now more than ever before, Americans need to educate themselves because there's such a stream of misinformation, and we need to understand American history. These are important things to know for us to not only be citizens, I think, but just to maintain our own sense of sanity amongst everything. We need perspective to understand the context of everything that's happening. But the governor of Indiana, Durbin, used the National Guard to suppress the Klan. I mean, there were the military was in the South until it was forced out because they were helping to protect black votes.
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. Jonathan, thank you for that. If you come across a good book on it, tweet it to me, would you?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call for protest. Call for action. Call for change.
So I saw this on Twitter yesterday. It is identified as having come from the Holocaust Museum. I can't vouch for that, although I have been through the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. and Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, and I've seen similar posters. This purports to be one from decades ago, and it's titled "Early Warning Signs of Fascism." I'll just give you the list, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. Powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government intertwined, corporate power protected while labor power is suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, and fraudulent elections. Are we there yet? It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Dennis in Bergenfield, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
Hey, Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Maybe not. Dennis, I'm going to put you on hold, and you can negotiate it with Joyce. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call, and I'm 100% with you on mask wearing. Please keep preaching it. So, however, I do want to disagree with you. I'm with you in principle, but I want to disagree with you about calling for a second round of impeachment. We have this trio of crises, the pandemic, the economy with 42 million unemployed, and, of course, the police brutality and racial injustice. And all three of these crises have been created or greatly exacerbated by the corruption, incompetence, and racism of this so-called administration. But the reason I'm against another impeachment, Tom, is because I believe it's time for the Democratic Party, led by Biden and Pelosi, to step up the effort to make an affirmative case to address people's needs and get out the vote in November. In other words, it's not enough to call it the white national oligarchy that Trump and 40 years of Reaganism have created. We need Democratic leadership to offer clear alternatives right now for racial justice and economic justice to draw a stark contrast to the full-blown fascism that a second Trump term would bring. So, Tom, if the Democratic Party can harness and engage all the courage and righteousness that's in the streets right now, I believe we can landslide this greedy racist in chief right out the door and all his shameless enablers in Congress. And that, to me, would be the best bulwark against him trying to pull any dirty tricks or stunts between November and January 20th, which you've been concerned about. What do you think?
Yeah. I think you make a good point, Jeff. In fact, you make a very good point, and you may well be right. It could be something that dilutes the efforts that we've been talking about, and might not be such a good idea. Let me ponder that. My concern is this: Donald Trump has 6 months until January, and until he has to leave office, assuming that he gets voted out, which is looking like that's what's going to happen. God only knows. But he has 6 months in which he can do an extraordinary amount of damage. In a 6-month period in early 1933, Hitler basically ended democracy in Germany. I don't know blow by blow the history of Mussolini's rise to power in Italy, but I would be surprised if it took him more than 6 months. Typically, what happens is you have this relatively long period, a year or so, of, and in this case it had been 3 years, where a fascist leader is consolidating power slowly, carefully, purging their administration or purging the government of the people who would challenge them. Trump now wants to get rid of Esper, his defense secretary, for example. Purging the people, he got rid of Jeff Sessions and replaced him with Bill Barr. Purging them of people who would challenge him and replacing them with people who are not just toadies, but enthusiastic toadies, who believe in fascism. And when there's a certain point where a critical mass is achieved, and it's sort of like we see the virus, going from 1 death to 10 deaths to 20 deaths to 50 deaths and within 3 weeks, you're at 5,000 deaths, and then you're at 50,000 deaths a month later. That's how rapidly the flip happens when governments fall apart. That's what happened in Hungary with Orban. Orban was president for several years before he basically flipped that country in less than a year to fascism. I wrote an op-ed about this. You can find it over on Alternet. And so my concern is that there is a very real possibility that Donald Trump will end the American experiment either before the election or before January 20th. And I think the most likely window would probably be between November 3rd and January 20th. And the only thing that I can think of to head that off would be a successful impeachment. Now, the question is, has he, inflamed enough Republicans that they would go along with this? It doesn't look like he has, from what Casey Hunt has been reporting over at NBC. 2 days in a row, she's been asking Republicans about Trump, and the only one who has been willing to speak out was Lisa Murkowski. And this morning, Trump came out and said that he would fly to Alaska and campaign for anybody, for the Democrat who runs against Lisa Murkowski. So, basically what he's saying to all the other Republicans is, you guys better stay terrified. Now, that's what fascists do. And so I'm really concerned, but I absolutely get your point. And if this were a more normal time, and we were not in the midst of all these crises that I think are leading us toward fascism, I'd completely agree with you, Jeff. But I could probably argue your position as well as I just argued mine. This is a perilous time. Am I making sense?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would say is us putting our faith in Republicans acting in good conscience is I think, so much riskier. I mean, time and again.
Well, it's only going to take 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah, I mean,
we already have one, maybe 2.
I would just rather put my faith in the energy and all the people out in the streets right now, and keeping them in the fold.
Yeah, I get it. I absolutely get it. Jeff, thank you. That's a very thought-provoking comment, and, I'm always willing to learn. I appreciate it. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option.
To the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back with your calls in just a moment. I want to say a special word of thanks, a special thank you to those of you who have already called 877-378-8669 and made your contribution to Free Speech TV. We've had a number of people contribute. It is really heartwarming. It really means a lot, and it also is going to help us keep going. We're nowhere close to our goals. We still have a ways to go, and we'll be showing up every day until we finally hit them. But a lot of you have, and I just wanted to thank you. I don't think that I acknowledge people enough, just generally in my life and here too. It means a lot to all of us. And thank you so much for the help that you've been giving. if you haven't yet called Free Speech TV to say, yes, I watch programs on Free Speech TV, I watch the Thom Hartmann program, I get value from the Thom Hartmann program, I use some of the things he says in my interactions with others, I post stuff on Facebook or Twitter, or I tell my friends or whatever, and you haven't called Free Speech TV yet, please do. Please. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. This network does not exist if you don't support it. Yeah, you. Seriously. And we need your help. We need your help. We're behind. We're you know, it costs money to run a network. I realize it's a tough time. I think I've talked about that probably way more than I need to over the last few fundraisers, so I'll just leave it at that. But please, if you can help out, call now. And you can also go to freespeech.org and contribute as well, but please do it now during the show. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number to support this extraordinary television network, the little engine that could. The work that they're doing is just spectacular. With a $20 gift, you get your choice of the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting, Are You car magnet. With a $50 gift, you get your choice of the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann mug with my mug on it, my face on it. With a $100 gift, you get the 2 Free Speech TV face masks. With a $120 gift, we've got a pile of choices for you. A whole bunch of different things that you can choose from. With a $120 gift, there's the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. There is Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. There's Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. There's Tim Wise's book, Dear White America. There is Paul Kivel's book, Uprooting Racism. Your choice, any of those premiums, any of those gifts, with a $120 gift. With a $240 gift, you can hang out with me and a couple of small number of other donors and a live Zoom conversation, and we can just, you know, have a candid conversation about the events of the day or whatever questions you may have or whatever you want to pitch to me. You know, if you want me to know about something or think about something, this is the way to do it. And so the $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks, the Hidden History of the War on Voting book, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting, Are You car magnet, and the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. All of that comes in the Thom Hartmann University box for $360. And with a $1,000 gift, when all this settles down, and hopefully that day will come when we've all had a vaccine or whatever it takes, come to Portland and hang out with us. You can watch the 3rd hour of the show, and we'll walk down the street to a nice little restaurant and have lunch together. So those are the premiums, basically, the gifts that are being offered by Free Speech TV. But the real gift from you to us is calling and making a contribution, be it a one-time contribution or a commitment for, you know, to be a member of the Sustainers Group, a regular monthly contribution. And of course, our gift to you is all the work, and there's an enormous amount of work. Every Friday afternoon, I read the list of all the people on this show who work on this program. I think it's probably about 15 people. And over at Free Speech TV, you got a TV network. It's being run by something in the neighborhood of about 20 people. There's a bunch of us working on this program and on this network to bring this all to you. And if we make it look easy, that's great. That's an indication that we put the extra work in, because it's not easy. There's actually an enormous amount of time and effort that goes into producing 3 hours of good television programming. You know, on my end, there's a lot of work. On the people who work with me, on Sean's end and Nate's end, and you know, Patrick and Nigel and Sue and Geraldine and Dave and Joyce and over at Free Speech TV. It's no small thing. we need your help to keep it going. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and share what you can with Free Speech TV.
While our leader hides in a bunker, we're here with a call for change.
So we've got a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com for people who support our program, and there's a really troubling concatenation of events, events, that are happening in the United States right now. We created these concentration camps for refugees seeking asylum. This was Stephen Miller's big project. And we've got concentration camps for children, concentration camps for male adults, concentration camps for female adults. And now we've got this virus sweeping through the United States, and people are starting to die in these concentration camps, which has provoked ICE or whoever's running them to deport hundreds of the children back to the countries that they came from without their parents, which is mind-boggling, and in many cases carrying disease. This is serious stuff, and we need to be talking about it. The new video is over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Michael in Hammond, Indiana. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, Tom? You know, I'm from black neighborhoods, and a lot of times, I mean, my opinion may not be one that's real popular right now, but I always thought education and you going to school and taking advantage of your opportunity was the way out of a lot of this. I'm not saying that police don't do things, because I've been racially profiled and the whole nine. But by the same token, I've seen a lot of black families say, oh, I can't control my kids. And the kids play and they do all kind of stuff. And they go to school.
So do white kids, Michael. So, you know, if I was growing up and I thought, okay, if I work my ass off in school and even get to college, if that's even possible, there's probably not going to be a job out there for me because of the color of my skin. I would certainly not have the incentive to work as hard as I do. I think that this is the old Reagan strawman argument, Michael, that you're repeating, in my humble opinion. And that is that, you just need to pay attention in school. And then by the way, Betsy DeVos and all the way back through Reagan, well, hell, all the way back to the founding of the Republic, schools for black people? No, not so much. So, we're going to give black people bad educations, send them to bad schools. We're going to restrict their ability to have, a decent place in the workforce. Keep them out of unions forever, and then the unions got destroyed, and just keep them out of the employment pool in general. It just seems like too easy an answer to blame black families for the crisis of policing, of racist policing in the United States.
See, that's the reason why I listen to you, Tom, because you explain things in a very non-condescending way.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Michael.
much.
Good to hear from you. Good talking to you. In Virginia, in Bassett, Virginia. Hey, Virginia, what's up?
Hi, Tom. When I have conversations with people and we're talking about how a lot of the blacks are being killed by white people, and then I get this remark back, well, the blacks killing on the blacks, they're the ones who are decimating their race because they're the ones killing each other off. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, let's stop saying the blacks. And secondly, this is an argument that was used back, in the 60s and 70s when it was Irish people coming to the United States and they were being discriminated against and they were being ghettoized, and there was a lot of crime and violence within Irish communities. In fact, it's one of the things that led to Boston's police department being mostly Irish. It's a whole long story there. There's a book about this called When the Irish Became White. And the argument was, they've got that weird gene. They got red hair. They're all crazy. They're inclined to criminality. And then in the 1890s, it was Italians. And now Trump is trying to sell us this on Hispanics. Virginia, we're all just people here. The circumstances, it's the conversation I was just having with Michael a moment ago. The circumstances we grow up in are not absent or separate from the environment within which we're growing up. And when that environment is explicitly and clearly racist, and our ability to succeed in the world is, it may still be there for the occasional exceptional person. And I would argue that, up until relatively recently, those were the exceptions that proved the rule. And the rule still stands, by the way, that's what you're going to get. And so it's not, you can't blame oppressed people for reacting to oppression in a way that is fairly predictable in history, regardless of race, has repeatedly demonstrated happens. Virginia, thank you for the call. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Also, you might want to stop and think about how the Scots fought each other, too. People fight people. But no.
Oh, and the Irish, the Troubles, up until 30 years ago, killing each other.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, everybody is talking about bad police departments. Well, everybody's police department comes under the control of the mayor and their city council. People need to attend their city council meetings. These are open to the public. People need to get a copy of their city budget, print it out, people, and read it. Order Robert's Rules of Order so you can understand the formalities of a city council meeting. Find out where your city tax dollars are going. Be able to stand up and speak if you don't like something. Look at your police department budget. You do not need a police department that is driving around in armored personnel carriers with a chain gun on top. That is for the military. And a lot of that stuff is bought through federal grants that go back to Clinton's war on drugs. Your city should not be owning these things. They don't need machine guns. They're there to protect and serve. Those police officers confronted the protesters as if they were criminals, when they should have been dispersed around the protesters to make sure there were no agitators harassing them or starting the riots or breaking into buildings and starting the looting. The protesters were peaceful people and using our legal system to object to what had happened. But if you want to stop this killing of people, you have to control your police department, and the way to control your police department is through the budget and the city council. And if you don't like the way your city council is operating, how much do they dump into discretionary spending? Did you know that cities have discretionary spending that you can't even track? You don't know where it goes. Is it more than what goes into your neighborhood, into your city council district? How much are these people paid? Where are the lines of the districts? Have they been gerrymandered so that your people have no voice? You can sue to have them redrawn. People need to instead of sitting in front of the idiot box, they need to be paying attention and learning. Learn Robert's Rules of Order, understand them, and use them at a city council meeting and put a stop to the murder of people. These policemen have no right to attack us. They're not here to. They shouldn't have equipment that would hold off a war, an invasion of Russian or Chinese troops. That's up to the Army National Guard, and to hold the ground until the Marines get here. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm with you, Norma, and in a way, you're echoing my call. People call up and they complain about Democrats, and I say, cool, get inside the Democratic Party and take it over. Now people are complaining about policing. And yeah, but
inside the machine.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm saying
machine.
get inside the machine, right? Exactly. And also don't be afraid to take on the police unions, and that's the big challenge of our time, frankly, that is very much not discussed the way it should be, which is the power that is held by these unions, and in some cases they're not even unions, they're so-called these benevolent associations or whatever that are operating as protection rackets and bribery rackets. I mean, giving $1 million to Andrew Cuomo so that he'll shut up about police. It's mind-boggling. And you can see this over on David Sirota. Go to davidsirota.com. You can see the whole thing laid out. And it's not just Andrew Cuomo. It's every governor in the country. It's mayors. It's, et cetera, et cetera. Raise some hell about this. We absolutely have to do it. One other point I'd make, Norma, apropos of what you're talking about, is there was a group of people who were protesting using their First Amendment right to peaceably assemble and petition their government for redress of grievance in Charlotte, Virginia a few years back. And what did the police do? They surrounded them to protect them.
Yes,
and then you look at what's going on right now, and what's the difference between the people who are being beaten by the police right now and the people who were protected by the police in Charlottesville, Virginia? The people in Charlottesville, Virginia were all white, and they were calling for white power and white supremacy. And the people who are out in the streets today are not all white, and they are calling for, frankly, the dismantling of white power structures and white privilege and a pluralistic society where, an equal society.
Yeah, and
you wanted to add something?
Somebody teach Trump what Antifa, that's an acronym, and what it stands for.
Yeah, it means anti-fascist. Yeah, it's like saying, Antifa is like conservative. It's a political position. It's not an organization. Norma, thank you. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Or pro-life, or pro-choice, or, there may be organizations around those, but this is a political position. We'll be back. And welcome back. Mallory in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Mallory, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I was just wondering if, let's say, best case scenario, Biden wins, Trump goes off and does his news organization or whatever, how do we communicate with the believers, the true believers who, I don't even know how to talk. I have family members, and I don't even know how to talk to them, how to explain facts to them.
Yeah. We have a real serious problem with our media, Mallory, and slowly some of the corporate media is grudgingly being dragged into the 21st century, and frankly, the excesses of the Trump administration, I think, have provoked a lot of that. But there is progressive media out there that you would want to expose them to and tell them about. I mean, you're listening to this show on X-Ray FM. There's Free Speech TV. There's YouTube. There are ways to share information with people, and educate yourself as well as you can.
Well, yeah, but I also feel like they're so adverse to facts, to logic and everything, that it's like, is there an emotional way to get them to understand?
Good question. And I don't have an easy answer. I think repeatedly pointing out that the position of the Democratic Party has been, since the New Deal, since the 1930s, the position of the Democratic Party has been the position of working people. Now, granted, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, it was largely white working people. Since the 60s, it's been all working people. But the position of the Democratic Party has been, by and large, to stand for working people and families. And the position of the Republican Party has been clearly since the 1920s, when the last of the progressive Republicans were flushed out of the system with Teddy Roosevelt and Taft, has been to be here of, by, and for the big corporations and the billionaires, the very, very rich. And to say to people, provide me with an example of something that contradicts that. I've been doing this show for 16 years, Mallory, and we've been running a contest for a couple of years there. I ran it real formally. We made a big deal about it. A show element.
if you can name one piece of legislation introduced since Ronald Reagan became president that was introduced by a majority of Republicans, that was passed with a majority of Republicans, that principally benefited the working class or the poor in the United States, you win an autographed copy of one of my books. And nobody, to the best of my recollection, has ever won that contest. Now, you can just pick any random piece of legislation the Democrats propose, and it fits that criteria.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks for all the work that you do. I have enjoyed that contest because I have never heard anybody contradict you. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, and that's the question to ask your friends or your relatives who say that they're Republicans. Okay, great. What has the Republican Party done for you? Oh, well, they gave me a tax cut. Yeah, but 85% of the tax cut went for the top 1%. Give me something the Republicans have done where the majority of it, more than 51% of it even, just a small majority, actually went for working people, or the average person, or poor people for that matter, even more importantly. So, Mallory, spot on. Thank you very much for the call, and good luck in waking up friends, neighbors, relatives, co-workers. I mean, I think that's part of my job, is to help you win what we used to refer to as the water cooler wars. Not so many water coolers anymore, but you know what I'm talking about. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before you know.
We can't go back to normal. We need a call for change.
So it turns out back in November, the spy agencies in the United States were notifying the Trump administration that something's going on in China. Looks like another SARS outbreak. Maybe we should get ready for this. It was ignored. I've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program that basically goes through the whole timeline, all the way from, actually going back to 2018 when Trump disbanded 3 different anti-pandemic agencies in the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Council, and the executive branch. Just closed them down, fired the people. That was the end of that. How he ignored the intelligence in November, he ignored the intelligence in December, he ignored the epidemic now coming into the United States in January, he ignored it in February, just going the blow-by-blow timeline. And I think it's really worth having it all in one place, a good recap, a good summary of this that you can refer to and you can share with your friends. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Doug in Manistee, Michigan. Hey, Doug, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I love the show.
Thanks. Manistee, you're up in the Charlevoix area, aren't you?
No, it's in the UP.
Okay. Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. Okay, I know where you are. Go ahead.
Michigan. Isn't this a slow motion coup?
I think it is.
What's going on here with Trump? Yeah. And,
I think it is. And the big question is going to be, now that Mark Esper is backing away, I mean, in order for a coup to be successful, you have to have the military. And now that you've got several well-respected military people speaking out, the most obvious, being our former Secretary of Defense, but now you've even got our current Secretary of Defense saying, hey, wait a minute. I have a little bit of hope, but I'm frankly very, very concerned about this.
Yep, me too. But, we can't let them keep getting away with this stuff. And I think there should be consequences, trials or whatever it takes,
Well, it appears that the consequence that we're going to have, Doug, is going to be on November 3rd when it's time to flush the that word that starts with T. Randall, and thank you for the call. Randall in Glendora, California. Hey, Randall, what's up?
Hey, Tom. My wife and I had a near-death experience with a off-duty police officer going to dinner and karaoke one evening. Unfortunately, we were involved in a road rage incident, and we couldn't get away from the driver. We went on for a mile, and my wife's with me. I didn't know what else to do, so I got out of the car, which I shouldn't have, but I went over to the car, talking to a rolled-up window, telling him to please leave us alone. Next thing I know, my wife's yelling out the side of the passenger side of our car, a man with a gun behind you, a gun, a man with a gun. I turn and look, and I'm staring down the barrel of a gun, There's a man draped over the top of his Jeep with a gun. I ran back into the car. I tried to get going. He ran over to our car, went right after my wife. He shoved his gun directly in her face. He followed her back into the car. I thought I was going to see her head explode and then mine.
Wow. And he was an off-duty cop.
He was.
Were you able to do it? Were you able to do anything about this legally, Randall, afterwards?
No, nothing became of the incident. I mean, nothing became of it, except that I did find out who he was. I complained to the city about him. I guess I could have pursued it legally. I didn't pursue it because we weren't, I talked to several lawyers, but we weren't physically injured. But he held us there at gunpoint, pointing it at my head and at my heart. Until the sheriffs arrived, they took statements, and we all went on our merry way. And but I did find out, because he's all over the internet. He was a ex-combat soldier, and he's got all kinds of social media posts and everything else. And I complained to the city about it. The police chief of the town next door to us, where he works, stepped in and did an investigation, even though I didn't ask him to, because they just try to whitewash everything. They exonerated him, said he didn't do anything wrong. And I just wanted to mention that exactly a year ago this month at the Corona Costco, there was an off-duty LAPD officer that was in a shoving match with a larger man. He got knocked down, embarrassed in front of his wife and child. He lost his temper, pulled out his gun, and killed him right in the Costco, shot his parents, and nothing happened to him. Nothing. He never spent a day in jail. He was never arrested, nothing. And I encourage everybody to look that up and demand answers. As far as I know, the last time I heard, he was at home getting on a paid vacation.
Yeah.
So
we have a crisis in this country. It's a real crisis. Randall, thanks for sharing that story with us. That's grim. Tom in Media, Pennsylvania. You got the last minute of the show, Tom. What's up?
Yeah, Tom, real quick. I mean, I always thought that you were a strong union man, and now it seems that you want to take away collective bargaining rights, decent wages, increasing.
Many of these police unions, Tom, all across the country are not actually operating. Tom, stop for a second. They're not operating under the what's the name of the law? The Wagner Act of 1935. They're not all incorporated as unions. Many of them are called police benevolent associations. They're not actual unions. Yes, I'm all in favor of unions. But okay. If when the power of a union is being abused, whether it was the power of unions and like the union that my father belonged to, the Machinists Union back in the 1950s and 60s, that was excluding black people from the workplace in Lansing, Michigan, or whether it's police unions that are protecting killer cops, those unions need to be subject to some oversight as well. And Tom, these police unions, if you want to call them that, are protecting killer cops. And everybody in America knows it. We've all figured this out. It's not a secret anymore. Hey, thanks so much to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Joyce the Hammer Nance, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Dave Fulton, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, and Jabbermocky for helping us make this program work. And thank you to you for participating. So get out there, get active, tag You're It. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
We say fight back!